20th, 2026 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Miriam Zahn, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Zoning Board. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this special meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube page and also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. A transcript of this meeting is also being taken using the video and audio, so we need all speakers to utilize one of the microphones in the room. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter. Ms. Sands, please call the roll of the members.
Vice Chair Zahn.
Here.
Mr. Yuko is excused. Mr. Millay is excused. Mr. Mullen.
Here.
Mr. Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Curran.
Here.
Ms. Chifo.
Here.
Mr. Feskins is excused. Mr. Chanchuli.
Here.
Mr. Bell.
Here.
Chairman Liketz is excused. You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you. Andy Ball is the zoning board's attorney. Mr. Ball advises the board members on matters of law and is the key interface with the applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball does not vote on the applications. Jessica Sands is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Our board secretary works with applicants on preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. The board secretary also does not vote on the applications. Also present are our experts who are hired annually by the board to provide input. Tonight we have Marie Raffay from Collier Engineering and Tom Behrens from Burgess Associates, our board planner. These experts are seated at the table to the right of the board, the public's left. They do not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate. Oh, I'm missing a page. But only 7 can vote. Yes, missing a page. That's too bad. So we're just gonna just skip to the important part. Everyone's going to have an opportunity to ask questions after each witness is heard. When we're done hearing everything, then the public will have the opportunity to comment. When it is time to comment, please be careful as to how that your comments are relevant, and when you're asking questions, make sure that the questions are not preceded with a statement about the case. They should be a direct question to the witness. And before you ask your questions, clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address. It's important that our court reporter be able to have a clear and accurate public record. After all witnesses have been heard, oh, there we are, all members of the audience will have their second opportunity to speak, and at that time you may express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed, and we enter into executive session where the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to our executive session, but you will not normally be able to participate in our discussion. Tonight we only have 1 applicant, so I think we're going to skip over giving the synopsis and just get right to it. We're doing hearing 11 to 15 Beechwood Road. So, yeah.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Hillary Alls of Dempsey & Sheehan, appearing on behalf of the applicant MRY Beechwood 1115 LLC for the property located at 1115 Beechwood Road in the CRBD zone. This application seeks preliminary and final major site plan approval, together with limited variance relief to permit the redevelopment of a long-standing but significantly deteriorated mixed-use building. Specifically, the applicant requests a D6 height variance to permit a building height of approximately 55.67 feet, where 42 feet is permitted, and an overall building height of 58 feet with appurtenances where 50 feet is permitted. A variance to permit 4 stories where 3 stories are permitted, and lighting variances for terrace lighting height of 49 feet 8 inches where 15 feet is permitted, and for maximum illumination at the property line for the entryway and signage lighting on Beechwood Road. The existing building, while historically old, is functionally obsolete. It does not comply with ADA requirements, modern life safety codes, or current building standards, and it contains documented structural deficiencies and environmental concerns. Rehabilitation would not yield a viable or meaningful improvement. In contrast, the proposed redevelopment will deliver a safe, code-compliant, and architecturally compatible building that enhances the streetscape and advances the city's planning objectives. Although parking is not required in the CRBD zone, the proposed application is driven by the goal of preserving the on-site existing parking, which is a benefit to the downtown. Relocating that floor area to the 4th story is what drives the limited height and story variances before you tonight. The 4th floor has been carefully designed with substantial setbacks to minimize visual impact, preserve light and air, and maintain consistency with the surrounding area. The proposed building is below the permitted FAR and is appropriate, comparable, and fully compatible with surrounding development. The lighting variances are equally limited and tied to safety, both for the rooftop terrace and for pedestrian access at the ground level, and have been designed to minimize any off-site impact. The requested variances for height and lighting are modest, purpose-driven, and directly tied to advancing sound planning objectives, including safety, accessibility, and ADA compliance, economic vitality, removal of environmental hazards, and is an aesthetic improvement. The proposed development replaces a substandard structure with a high-quality, compliant building that strengthens the downtown and aligns squarely with the master plan. The benefits are substantial and the deviations are modest and well-contained. The testimony will demonstrate that the proposal satisfies both the positive and negative criteria, can be accommodated on the site without detriment, and represents exactly the type of thoughtful redevelopment the CRBD zone is intended to encourage. I am happy to answer any questions, or I can call the first witness.
Do our experts have any questions?
Not for this one.
Okay. Board members, any questions?
Are you planning on calling the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I have just one question. You said, will you go in more detail? You said aligns with the master plan. You'll go in more detail with that?
The planner will. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we can call your first
Okay.
witness.
Mark Yeager.
If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
Mark Yeager, Y-E-A-G-E-R.
Thank you.
What is your occupation?
Real estate investor and developer.
And have you developed any property in the city of Summit?
Yes, since 2010, I have developed several new construction projects at 1 DeForest Avenue, 466 Springfield Avenue, 29 Euclid Avenue, and 125 Summit Avenue, and have undertaken significant renovation projects at 25 DeForest Avenue, 475 Springfield Avenue, 40 Beechwood Road, 343 and 344 Springfield Avenue, and 535 Springfield Avenue.
Thank you. And what is your relationship to the applicant of the subject property, and are you authorized to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, I am. I am the owner and the applicant of this site plan application.
And can you tell the board what is the goal for this property?
Certainly. As a 30-year resident of Summit, and having had my office in town for the past 16 years, and having completed almost a dozen projects in the downtown Summit area since that time, the goal in all of the projects that I've been involved with in Summit is to try and create spaces and environments that people are anxious and excited to work and live in. Places that are functional and modern, attractive, and create those spaces in a way that embraces the architectural charm and character of the neighborhood and surrounding area. If we can accomplish that goal through preservation and renovation, that would always be our first choice, but if not, And unfortunately, as is the case with the 11-15 Beechwood Road property, which is suffering from significant structural code, safety, and infrastructure deficiencies, then removing older buildings to create new buildings which will add value and opportunity for the city is required. I hope that the past work I have done in town demonstrates that approach, and the projects that we have created are ones that the community is happy with and proud of.
Recognizing that the architect will testify in further detail about the condition of the property, can you just touch upon some of the deficiencies that you're referring to?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. But first, I just want to be clear that when I acquired the Beechwood Road building, I had no predisposition on a salvage and renovate redevelopment project versus a demolish and rebuild new. As a matter of fact, the first direction I gave the Tapaceris architectural and engineering firm was to complete a structural and infrastructure assessment of the existing building and to complete that evaluation with the mindset of accommodating an expansion to the rear of the building, as I knew the CRBD zoning would have permitted me to do under today's zoning guidelines. It wasn't until the evaluation was complete that it became clear that not only would expanding the existing building not be feasible, but even renovating the existing building in its current state would be equally as fruitless. The reasoning behind that assessment was founded in three basic categories. The first is that the current building is not remotely close, nor could it be adaptable to become code and ADA compliant. The ground floor of the building is not at grade. There are steps into all of the spaces and therefore is not wheelchair accessible. Additionally, there's no elevator, nor would it be structurally possible to add one given the existing structural limitations of the building. Also, the current secondary means of fire egress are exterior fire escapes with drop-down ladders at the rear of the building that are accessed by climbing out of second and third floor windows. Also, there are no sprinklers in the building, nor could there likely be added because of the structural and space limitations throughout the building in its current configuration. And lastly, the building is laden with asbestos, which creates a significant potential health hazard for any occupant of the building. After we reviewed the code and safety issues, we discussed the second set of issues associated with this existing building, and that is its structural liabilities. As you have seen in the materials that we previously circulated, the foundation, which is made out of very, very old rubble wall, is cracked and deteriorating, as is the front facade, which is also cracked and rotting in several places. There is extensive water damage throughout the building from years of leaks and other issues, and each of the 3-story floors are sagging and in need of significant reinforcement. Lastly, there are randomly placed load-bearing walls throughout the 3 floors that prevent repair and rehabilitation from effectively taking place without further compromising the existing structural integrity of the building, which in no way is designed to handle more weight or greater loads that would be created by adding additional structural reinforcement of the building's current skeletal structure. Lastly, and from our viewpoint equally as important, in the thoughtfulness of the exterior design and architecture, and the importance of creating a street facade that is respectful and compatible with the character of other architecture in the neighborhood and the downtown, is how the building functions and operates behind the street-facing facade. I think of it as a movie set, where everyone sees the facade, and it's really important that be done well. But what is of equal importance is what goes on behind that facade that no one ever sees except for those people working or living in the building. So, with all due respect to the comments received from the Historic Preservation Committee, which strangely did not address any of the changes we made to the facade, based on their input during our 2 meetings over the past several weeks, which we think made the design better for sure, and those changes our architect will address shortly. But the Historic Preservation Committee's job is not to take into consideration the functional aspect of the space in which people are working. I understand that. Their job is to talk about historic preservation of architectural design features. But from the standpoint of practicality, what goes on behind that facade and how that space functions is as of equal importance. And under what would be a very complicated and ineffective rehabilitation scenario, what those employees working in that space would find would be window air conditioning units, and an oil tank in the basement that produces steam heat with no thermostats or controls. More modern and contemporary heating and air conditioning systems, such as rooftop-mounted units, for example, are not feasible because structural members would have to be added to the underdeck of the roof to support those units, and also to remediate all of the sagging floors throughout the building. And all of those structural members would be so thick that it would make already very low ceilings even lower, which space is also needed to be able to accommodate ductwork to distribute the air conditioning and heat throughout the space. And those structural members would have to be supported by columns that would reach all the way to the basement, whose rubble wall construction is not capable of supporting additional columns and additional loads. And adding other basement structural components would be placed on a 125-year-old concrete slab, none of which makes any sense. And I want to touch on the low ceilings comment too. Modern office space ceilings are 9 to 10 feet high. The current ceilings in this building are 8 feet high and would become even lower with attempting to add all of the structural reinforcement that we're talking about. Those current very low ceiling heights are determined by the front facade window placement and can't be changed or modified without altering the facade and the windows, which is exactly what the Historic Preservation Committee is suggesting that we do not do. Lastly, with all these necessary new columns would create even more obstacles in addition to the previously mentioned load-bearing walls, and the ability to lay out functioning, efficient, well-lit, desirous open office environments that are required by today's office users would be virtually impossible.
And based on those conditions and the recommendations of your professionals, was there a decision made to redevelop as opposed to rehabilitate the building?
Yes, after a thorough investigation of the property by the professionals and experts, analyzing various options and a lot of internal discussion, we reached the conclusion that attempting to rehabilitate the existing building would result in a significantly substandard building that would be unable to fully comply with all current construction, life safety, fire, and accessibility codes, including full ADA compliance and fire sprinkler coverage. In essence, we would attempt to do all of this renovation work, and what we would end up with is a building that no one would want to work in. And to do all of this solely to try and preserve a deteriorating and cracked facade that probably has a half a dozen coats of paint on it, has non-original old replacement windows, window air conditioning units, and retail storefronts that have been replaced and altered several times over the past many years, is not a responsible or reasonable approach to take. The reality is, unfortunately, there isn't anything really worth preserving with this building that's suffering from years of deferred maintenance. It is old, but it is no longer historic. With new construction, however, all of these building deficiencies can be satisfactorily and adequately addressed, and will also allow for existing environmental hazards to be removed and remediated, all mechanical systems to be modernized, and structural components and challenges to be reconstructed, resulting in a safe, totally code compliant, marketable, and viable redevelopment.
Can you briefly describe to the board what is being proposed?
Yes, the property is 84 feet deep, and the existing building is 60 feet deep. This allows for 4 tandem parking spaces at the rear of the building. Knowing how much parking is at a premium in the CRBD, we thought a reasonable and responsible plan was to try and preserve that parking on site and design around it. The parking and service area we would create would be approximately 2,000 square feet. So by preserving that area for parking and building services, we shifted that floor area to the 4th floor to allow us to maintain the permitted 300% FAR that the downtown CRBD zoning permits. We've designed the 4th floor to be set back 12 feet from the Beechwood Road elevation to reduce its visual impact from the street. From a neighborhood context standpoint, the 5-story Bassett building is 150 feet away, and the rear roof peak of the 50-foot plus 33 Union Place building is immediately adjacent to this Beechwood property. These building heights, together with several other 4-story buildings in the CRBD, make this proposal with a recessed 4th floor compatible with surrounding properties and consistent with this area of the CRBD. This concept of having on-site parking on a deep lot and shifting the displaced floor area to a setback 4th floor is the same situation that we encountered and that was approved by this board and delivered in our 466 Springfield Avenue project in 2016.
And can you please tell the board what uses are proposed for the building?
On the first floor facing the street, any commercial or retail tenants as permitted in the CRBD, and any permitted office use in the CRBD in the remainder of the upper floors of the building. The building is designed to provide a little over 1,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space and approximately 11,000 square feet of upper floor office space.
And on that step back fourth floor, there's a terrace proposed in the front. Can you describe generally the terrace space and who will have access to that space?
Yes, the terrace space will be private space utilized only by the building's office tenant or tenants and their invitees. We have created outdoor terrace space similar to this in a number of our other developments in town. And we regulate use, hours, operating restrictions, furniture safety, et cetera, in the leases that we enter into with the tenants of those buildings. Assume hours of operation will be a question that will come up in most of the other examples that I point to. Those hours have typically been 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
And you stated that one of the main objectives was to preserve the parking in the rear of the building. Can you explain to the board how the parking will be distributed to the tenants of the building and touch on the circulation?
Yes, we propose to preserve the current 4 spaces at the property. We anticipate assigning 3 of those spaces to the office tenant or tenants and 1 of the spaces to the first floor commercial tenant. Because of the different hours of operation, we would anticipate that the office user or users utilizing the 2 front spaces and 1 of the rear spaces, and the ground floor commercial tenant would use 1 of the rear spaces. And under, a unique set of circumstances, if one of the office tenants that's blocked in by the commercial tenant needs to access their vehicle during business hours, they'd simply walk into the store, ask the proprietor to move their car, and they shift them around. It's not an uncommon practice in downtown, given the parking restrictions that we face.
And can you describe the pickup of garbage and recycling?
Yes, we've located the trash enclosure close to the alley to make pickup as easy as possible for the city's DPW. The city's garbage and recycling vehicles enter the alley, the service alley from Summit Avenue, and service all of the Union Place stores and restaurants from that alley. So we would anticipate their last alley pickup each morning as they exit onto Beechwood would be our enclosure on the right-hand side of the alley.
And there was a question in the engineer's review regarding construction logistics. Can you walk the board through that process?
Yes, so we have encountered the situation in downtown logistical challenges many times with the projects that we've previously done in Summit, and specifically in the CRBD. So I'm very aware of what needs to be done and how to ensure safety and compliance with all the requirements from the city. Typically, if approvals are received, there will be coordination meetings with the city on the staging and phasing and means and methods of the construction that will include the city's construction officials, engineering group, and police and traffic officials. Given the logistical challenges of this particular site, and with many of the details need to be worked out by the city, it's highly likely that we would seek to close the western portion of the service alley for intermittent periods of time during the demolition and base building structural and finishing portions of the project. Given the use of heavy equipment and cranes and dumpsters, trucks, scaffolding, it'd be without question the safest way to complete this work until the shell of the building is completed and the work is focused on the inside. So the details of this work, along with the erection of sidewalk bridges and all the other safety measures around the site, will be worked out with police and traffic safety and the city's construction officials at the proper time.
And did you have an opportunity to share these plans with the adjoining neighbors?
I did, yes. I met with each of the adjoining property owners before we filed the application to let them know what our thoughts were and what direction that we may be taking this, and then forwarded the plans directly to them. At the same time, we submitted them to the city, and have had a couple of follow-up discussions with some of them on questions since then, but have not heard anything from an objection standpoint from any of them to date.
Perfect. I don't have any other questions.
Any questions from our experts?
I think I'll save it for the engineer.
I'll just comment briefly. And Mr. Yeager, how are you, first of all? Good evening. You touched on probably one of the biggest questions, the reason to, as from your standpoint, to demolish the building versus renovate? And I suspect one of your, maybe your architect will give some additional details about those aspects that you mentioned.
Yes.
I'm just referencing the construction officials' comments. So while I guess you might have spoken with adjoining property owners, do you have any form of, I don't know, he says written consent, would that be required, at least from the one with the shared building wall? Is that something?
So my assumption was that we would go through this process first and
Okay, so
see
it's a
whether or not.
subsequent condition?
I certainly
conditional-
would
okay.
approach them
Okay.
at the conclusion of this discussion as to what the plan is to move forward with those discussions and details for certain.
All right, thank
And,
you.
I'm sorry, just to follow, with 475 and 466, I believe it's a code requirement, or, you know, it's a requirement that you receive their consent to have the construction, so that's something
Yes.
you had done
We've
before,
done-
so
we've-
you're just gonna follow the
It
same
would be
procedure.
obtained at the appropriate time?
exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And last question would be, I think an adjoining building has their heating equipment on your property. Could you just explain that relationship?
Yes, so one of the adjoining property owners, which is 18 Bank Street, has a 3-foot wide service easement along the north property line of the 11 through -15 Beechwood Road property, where they have an air conditioning unit that services one of their office suites on it. We've had conversations with them about relocating that to their roof at our expense during this process, and they've appeared to be amenable to that discussion.
Very good, thank you. No further questions.
Questions from the board?
All right, go ahead. No, go ahead, you go first.
Maybe this will come up in the architectural presentation to follow, but since you mentioned internal bearing walls at random locations, your words, there's no documentation of that I've seen in the drawings that I looked at again just now. It's a demo plan, but it's a site demo. You're not demolishing interior partitions specifically. Will the architect talk to that, where those
Yeah.
are and why they could not be accommodated?
Yes, yes, he will.
All right, thank you.
I guess prior to acquiring this building, what level of due diligence did you do on the physical condition of the building? Did you get a property condition assessment prior to closing?
Not a technical one, no. It was a unique set of circumstances. If you call the former owner to this project, property Gil Oren, passed away very suddenly. His estate was anxious to work through a process to dispose of the building very quickly from estate planning purposes. So we agreed to a very expedited due diligence period. And we had done walkthroughs and stuff, but we had not really conducted an extensive, detailed
It's typical.
architectural engineering.
Gotcha. I mean, it's typical to get a PCA before you close on a commercial real estate transaction, so didn't you take on a good degree of risk going in there?
Yes, it was, like I said, it was more of an accommodation for the family. The time frame, the accelerated time frame to close. We didn't do a typical 90, 120-day due diligence period where we did those kinds of assessments, which, you're right, I would typically have conducted. So as an accommodation to the family, we accelerated it and closed very quickly.
So knowing now what you didn't know then, would you have closed and/or would you have sought some sort of price adjustment given the condition of the building that you found?
We did seek a price adjustment based on the asbestos situation that we found, which was, as I'd mentioned, extensive. So that was the only thing that we did that was different relative to the existing, the initial agreement. So, yeah, it's hard, I don't know. I can't say with any degree of certainty as to whether or not I would have thought about it differently or approached it differently other than the circumstances that we had in front of us.
I guess what I'm trying to ascertain is this exclusively a situation of the building physically being not capable of being remedied internally, or is this a case of it just not being economically viable?
In my estimation, this is a case of the building not physically being able to be remedied into anything that would be marketable by today's space users. Low ceilings, no ADA code compliance. There's so many issues, sagging floors, HVAC, sprinklers, fire exits out of windows. You know, there's all those kinds of things that the building, given its age and state of deterioration, is not capable, in our estimation, of structural rehabilitation to allow for anything that resembles kind of a modern environment to be created.
Gotcha. And just Switching gears slightly, what's the current use of the upper floors? Is it office or is it residential?
The second floor was a law office by Mr. Oren, which has been closed for quite some time, and the third floor was a combination of office and 2 apartments.
Okay, so it's both floors are currently vacant?
There's 1 apartment user remaining in the building who will be leaving over the next several months.
Okay, thank you.
Sir?
I have a question. You're mentioning that it's, to make the building marketable. But currently, the building is almost 100% occupied, except for Mr. Oren's old office. I mean, the 2 retail spaces have been businesses that have been there for years. So obviously, they did not leave to seek new accommodations. How can you explain why, if it's fully occupied, how? I'm just trying to figure out your justification on saying that it's not marketable.
So, to be clear, the second floor is vacant. Most of the third floor is vacant. There's only 1 apartment user in it, and if you were to see the condition of his apartment, he's been in it for many years, you would not find that to be tenable at all. The front half of the third floor was office space that's been vacant for probably 2 years. The ground floor retail spaces are both anxious to relocate, given the condition of their space as well. There's been numerous instances of water damage, other issues with product being destroyed because of water infiltration and problems with the building itself. So both of those tenants, throughout the last many months of conversation, are actually anxious to go find.
So they were planning on leaving. It was after you purchased the property that they.
I approached them before I acquired the building. I approached them and had these conversations, and they were very cooperative, and will be relocating over the next couple of months.
So the relocating because there's not, because the building's going to be, because you purchased the building and that you're going to be renovating it or.
Yeah, we had conversations.
So they're not leaving on their own. They're leaving because of this, you're the new owner.
When approached with the idea of relocating, they were very receptive.
Well, and I think also relocating is not as easy because there's not that much space in the CRBD that's vacant for them to move to.
Correct, but both,
So-
I'm happy to report that through a lot of work, both of those tenants have found alternative locations to relocate to in the coming months.
And then the asbestos, it's only after any sort of construction's done, it's not.
That has to be remediated before.
But
Any
is it
kind
an
of-
issue right now for the current tenants? There's
No,
asbestos.
it's encapsulated
Okay,
right now.
that's
But
what I just
yeah,
wanted
but
to
as soon as you disturb it,
Yeah.
because it's in the
Mhm.
plaster, pipes, et cetera, as soon as you disturb it, and it becomes airborne, it becomes.
But isn't that
Not an
pretty?
issue right now.
Isn't that common with most buildings in the historic district?
I
that would
couldn't
have-
say most. Certainly, it's an issue with some, depending on their age and condition, but we found this situation to be extensive.
And your other buildings that you have rehabilitated in the downtown district, have you come across asbestos issues also?
Yes, not to this extent, though.
So it was tested?
Uh,
The asbestos, there's a way to test to see
Oh, yeah.
what level it is?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes, very much so. Yep.
Thank you.
So I just, after you had all this engineering studies done and you were talking to your architect, was there any discussion about maybe extending the second and third floors over the back and have covered parking as like 475 Springfield Avenue?
Yeah, that's what I had mentioned in my opening statement.
Mhm.
The first direction I had given them was to look into expansion of the existing building, just as you described.
I thought you meant the whole building.
Yeah, or even the second and third floor.
Yeah.
And it was determined that given the condition of the existing structure, that there was not a logical or feasible way to tie in an expansion of that building with things like the structural deficiencies that it's got, low ceilings, no mechanical systems, no sprinklers, not ADA compliant. There are lots of reasons, code-wise, structure-wise, infrastructure-wise, that expanding that building just did not make any sense.
How about with the new building? So you don't have to go for a height variance. Could you do it with a new building and just extend out?
That's
make
what
this-
we are doing.
Yeah, there's going to be covered parking? I didn't
Yes,
see that on the
covered
plan.
parking, yes.
And you still need a fourth floor?
Because,
Well-
go ahead.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. So what I had stated was, because we thought preserving the existing parking.
So you're going to move
was
that
the-
area up?
We're going to take
top.
that, like that block of space, literally, and move it up to the
That's
full
not the way
floor.
I
Yeah,
interpreted
and
it, so that's my
recess it
fault.
12 feet, so
I
it's not
apologize.
imposing on the streetscape.
Okay.
But that way, it's still within the permitted FAR of the CRBD, so we're not seeking a density variance. And that way, at the same time, we're preserving the parking.
I didn't see that when I looked at the plan, so I apologize.
No problem.
Well, I just have a question to piggyback on that so that we don't go back and forth on that. I'm a little confused about how, shifting that area from the parking it's going to the fourth floor. Really, the building is 4,000 square feet bigger than the existing building. I'm not talking about FAR, but I don't really see a shift. I just see an added floor. I see more floor area, more footprint for the whole building, and a fourth floor. So I'm a little confused about what the shift is, because I thought we went from like 7,000 something square feet to 12,000 square foot building and an extra 2,700 square feet on the fourth floor.
So he'd be permitted as of right to go to the planning board and just get site plan approval and have a building that big.
For 3 floors.
Right. So
So-
instead of doing the 3 floors, what he's doing is he's taking just that small portion. He would still be entitled to go all the way back, right, and make the building bigger than it is. But preserving the parking was more of a benefit to the downtown, so that's why he's taking that small portion and putting it on top, which then required the height variance.
So I see that as sort of an interpretation in the shift, as opposed to
So
what's there.
the site's plus or minus 4,000 square feet. So as of right, in the CRBD zoning, you can have a 12,000 square foot building. So that's what we're proposing. And what we've said is that, because we do think preserving that parking is a benefit, is to take that portion of the space and put it on the fourth floor, which is why we're here in front of the Board of Adjustment as opposed to the planning board.
Are potential users of the office going to be expected to get employee permits and park in the tier garage? Is that the plan?
Typically what happens, yeah, people who occupy office space, tenants who occupy office space in downtown Summit understand that that's part of the drill, that's what they do.
So what percentage of the expected parking demand at this office, for the office use, is going to be accommodated by those spaces?
Oh, a small portion at the end of the day. I mean, if you have, let's say, 3 employees per 1,000 square feet, 4 employees per 1,000 square feet, let's say that's probably 35 to 40 employees, potentially. So a tenth of them, maybe, on-site. Balance of them will go into the city system.
So it's not a material portion of the demand that we're serving by preserving these parking spaces?
I guess that's relative, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I think preserving the parking is also a benefit to the tenants, I would imagine, right?
Sure.
It'd be nice to have a spot near the building.
sure.
And there will be additional parking than currently is in place that's going to be within the Summit system, based on the plans, right? Because there will be larger footprint, probably more people, right?
Yeah, or even, right now, there's no demand because there's no
Sure.
tenants in the space,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yep.
kind
Yeah.
of the trade-off, right? But yes, for sure. So I would say like of the first 7,000 square feet, it is what it is today
Yep.
versus the additional square footage that will be added. That would all flow its way into the City of Summit parking system.
But there's also people that take the train, that's one of the draws of working at Summit. and
Yes, for sure.
obviously Within walking distance of the train station.
Yes, for sure.
Mr. Chanchuli, do you have any questions, or? Okay. I just have a couple. When you said you spoke to the neighbors, did you speak to the people from Lot 4? That's the one that's behind on the alley, because, their building would be impacted by a fourth floor in terms of the windows that they have on the 3rd floor there.
Is that 18 Bank Street?
Yeah, I assume so. It's the L-shaped building around our lot.
Um,
It's on the north and the east side.
Yeah, it's on, I think it's called Lot 4 is what I. Right? Yeah, right, yeah. Oh, 3, okay, that's 4, right? Yeah, I guess, yeah. So, okay. And then, in terms of asbestos abatement,
Did you want me to answer that?
Oh, I thought you said, yes,
Yeah.
because you said you did speak to the.
Yes,
people, so-
for sure. And when we designed our building, so their second floor windows are not going to be impacted under our plan because we're proposing that to be parking. So that space will be open. Their third floor windows, we've purposely set our building back on the north and east elevation 3 feet. Not required, but out of courtesy to them to maintain natural light into those windows, we set our facade back. The fourth floor, those are 2- and 3-story buildings, so our fourth floor is not going to necessarily, but not going to be impactful to their buildings. That's their roof.
Okay, thank you. In terms of asbestos, you would have to do abatement of asbestos whether you renovate the building or demolish the building and start new. Is that correct?
Yes. The issue under the renovation scenario is that because the predominance of the asbestos is in the plaster walls themselves, some of it's on pipes, but not much. Some of it's in floor tile, some of it's in roof mastic. The majority of it is in the plaster walls, given the age of these walls. So when those walls start coming down, in order to remediate, is where we start getting into some of the structural issues that we've talked about, given the current structural dynamics of this building.
Okay. And then just 2 other questions. One is, you were talking about that the building's not tall enough to sustain the ductwork and, give the kind of office space that I guess modern clients are looking for. And I just think it's interesting that the Boxwoods building, which is right next door, is the same height. And they seem to be doing it. So is there something, and I don't see like window units in the front of their building, or, I'm just wondering, did you explore how they accomplished that? Because it's
Yeah.
actually their building's a little bit shorter.
I don't know. I was not involved with Dr. Haba's purchase of that building and the renovation work he did. I'm not sure what conditions he found and what he did at that time.
And then, I guess the last question I have is, of the buildings, and there was a long list of buildings that you've worked on and in Summit, constructed or renovated. Can you give examples of buildings that you did rehabilitate versus demolish and build in Summit?
So 475 Springfield was a building that I was in front of this board for a couple of years ago. Was a significant rehabilitation, demolition, but preservation of some old infrastructure and new construction. 25 DeForest Avenue, the old Boris building, was a significant interior renovation, rehabilitation, windows, lobbies, common space, site work, et cetera. 125 was new, 1 DeForest was new, 466 was new. Yeah, and then we've done other smaller mixed-use buildings in town. 344 Springfield Avenue, we did 535, actually, the office building across the street, which was more of a cosmetic renovation and rehabilitation, but those are a couple of examples.
Thank you.
I have a question. Those buildings, are any of them historic? The ones that you mentioned, they seem like they were all pretty newish buildings.
Well, again, it's important that these buildings, when you say historic, the portion of the CRVD, the downtown, is a historic designation. Buildings themselves are not designated as historic. So when we worked on 344 Springfield, 343 Springfield, 355 Springfield Avenue, all in the historic district, I don't know that any of those buildings.
Any of the buildings more than 50 years old?
Oh, yeah. Oh, most of the buildings downtown are 1920, 1930.
So of those
Construction.
rehabs, were any of them
Yes.
from,
Those buildings are all, like 350 Springfield Avenue was the city hall in the 1940s. That building's been there since 1928, 29. So all those buildings are 100 years old at this point.
Like DeForest, the 25 DeForest isn't old, and
25 DeForest is an office building. That's not in the designated historic
Yeah.
district, nor was 1 DeForest.
And 475 Springfield is.
475 is in the historic district, but it's not considered a historic
It's
building.
not, okay.
Any other questions from the board?
So, just so I'm square, there's going to be 4 floors of office, well, commercial on the first floor, office space, office space, office space, utility space.
That's the proposal.
So it's actually 5 stories if you count the utility space setting back,
No,
No.
the
No?
4th floor office space is set back.
okay?
The rooftop mechanical units, which will be screened as is required, sits on top of the 4th floor. So that's not considered a floor. That's considered service.
Would you
and
need a ladder
mechanical
to
space.
service the equipment?
Oh, yes, yes. Right,
So
but
if I
it's not,
were-
good- but I mean, by the definition
I
of.
get you, I get
it's
you,
not
but if
considered
I
a
were to
floor.
have to ladder the building, I'd
It's
have
like,
to.
but it's like every other building in town, is that
One of the
mechanical
things-
spaces on the roof.
Yeah, one of the things I'm struggling with is we don't see any comments from the fire department on this. And that's not on the checklist. I know it's not important to you guys, but I think it's important that they have some sort of comment on that. I know it'll be done in the construction process, they'll have to meet fire code and all that. But it's just, in my old world, if I had to put a ladder up, it was 5 stories.
But it's important to note along those lines too, I mean, and we've worked with the fire department
Mhm. Oh, I know,
through
yeah.
all these projects, is the
They always-
idea that this building is incapable of being sprinklered in its current condition. It says a lot in and of itself. So,
But I'll leave it at that. Okay, thank you.
Questions from the public? No questions? Okay.
The engineer?
Good evening.
If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
My name is Nicholas Tsapatsaris. The last name is Tsapatssaris. Tsapatsaris.
Thank you, and can you briefly describe your background and experience for the board?
Yes. I am a licensed professional engineer. My offices are at 10 Wiltsey Square in the village of Ridgewood. I've been practicing as a professional engineer since 1992 and as an architect since 2000. I've appeared, well, education-wise, I went to Worcester Polytechnic Institute undergraduate with a degree in civil engineering, and then Worcester Polytechnic Institute after that for a Master's of Science degree in structural engineering. And then after that, I went to MIT and got a Master of Science in real estate development. I've been practicing for over 34 years. I've appeared before this board. I've appeared before many boards in the state of New Jersey, as well as having also volunteered on the Village of Ridgewood Board of Adjustment where I live for many years. I'm no longer a member of that board, but
Thank you. Any questions from the board, or would you like to accept his credentials?
Any questions? We'll accept.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, and can you just tell the board the steps that you've taken to prepare to give your expert testimony in this matter?
Yes, I've inspected the site, I've reviewed the application, I've prepared these plans and reviewed the administrative reviews, as well as your ordinances.
And recognizing that the site is fully developed with an existing building, parking, and other improvements, did you prepare civil engineering plans in accordance with the requirements of the applicable city ordinances and the municipal land use law?
Yes.
And using the plans that you prepared and that were filed with the board, can you describe the site plan from a civil engineering perspective?
Yes, I would like to refer the board to sheet SP-101, and I will approach the board that I've prepared to present.
Grab that microphone.
Everybody hear me?
think you have to turn it on.
That should be better?
Yes, it is.
Yes?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to begin with SP 101, and I will go through the site plan drawings. So the lot is located at the intersection, close to the intersection of Union and Beechwood. So it's pretty much near the train station. The lot size is 4,124 square feet. The proposed building that you see on detail 1 of SP 101 is 12,002 square feet. So the existing 3-story building, as the developer testified to, has substantial deferred maintenance. It is not in compliance with the IBC code today. It is not handicap accessible, nor is it fire rated or compliant. The mechanical systems are outdated. Structural defects include differential settlement throughout all of the floors. There is a step crack in the rear right foundation, and a number of other issues on the facade in terms of cracking that have resulted from water infiltration and settlement. We've had a geotechnical report prepared, and it is my professional opinion that working with the existing building, although not impossible, would not meet the goals that the developer has suggested of reinforcing the structure, adding helical piles in the back right, and removing so many existing partitions that at one time were partitions, and now it is my professional opinion that they've started to take load from the building. So I would like to also refer the board to a report that I prepared. It's in your package, dated December 29th, 2025. And the majority of this report will be testified to by the architect from my office, Michael Sass, but I did want to bring the board's attention, as I talk a little bit more about the existing building, to the second paragraph of that report and read from it that I wrote this on December 29th, 2025, after my own inspection of the structure, that, quote, structural deficiencies that would require significant repairs as part of any potential renovations. Substantial cracks at the rear foundation wall would require, in my opinion, helical piles to stabilize the structure in the event of any substantial renovation. And photograph 11 of this report shows some of those issues with the building. There are also some the front facade has a number of step cracks that would require restoration and structural strapping. There's step cracks. A step crack is not usually good because it means that it goes with settlement. It's not an expansion contraction crack. So again, final thing that I want to refer to on this report until the architect gets on later is that on the interior, there were areas on the third floor ceiling that had collapsed due to water damage. So I popped some ceiling tiles, tried to ascertain the structural reasons for it, but layers and layers of older partitions and ceilings were there. Going back to the site plan drawings, and before I get there, basically, I would again put in for the record that I know, having seen the reports, that there is asbestos, there's an oil tank, there's lead paint, There is water infiltration, rotted woods, doors, and floor systems in the building. At this point, I'd like to start to talk about the proposed building. And I show that on drawing 1 of SP 101. Like I said before, it's a 12,000 square foot building that is within and under the limits of the City of Summit's FAR, which is 3.0. In fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're approximately 300 feet less than what would have been permitted. The original design charge that our client gave us was to do whatever we could to preserve those 4 parking spaces at the back of the building. And in doing that, the concept was whatever volume of building would have existed in the back for a compliant 3.0 FAR application, we would take that, extract it, and in our design, bring it to the top. We have successfully done that for our client at 475 Springfield Avenue, where there was, as one of the board members mentioned, a very small but valuable parking area at the back of that. So in essence, this is very similar. That's the concept that I think the chairwoman was asking about also, is that that space gets put on the roof. And again, it's all within what is permitted with your ordinance of 3.0. So I'm pointing again to 1. Can everybody see the spaces in the back? There are 4 spaces back of the building. Right now, they function with a municipal alleyway that runs east to west. If you looked at where I'm pointing now at detail 2, it shows how far back the 4th floor will be set back. It's about 11 feet. And again, very similar to what we did at 475, but it's set back to also not be as visible, which the architect will testify to, from the ground, as you can see in the rendering to my left. Not quite sure if we should enter this, but
We can enter that as A1.
okay. So I'll mark it as A1. So the upper 4th floor level that I'm pointing to right now that's shaded differently is what I am showing you over here. So in our design, we analyzed, from an engineering perspective, lines of sight so that it would be set back and not as visible. In terms of parking and circulation, you could still go in from Beechwood from east to west, and the turning radii work fine to be able to make a left or right in and out of those parking spaces. To the right of the parking spaces, we've left some space for refuse, and I'll get into that in a few more sheets. And as the developer testified to earlier, if you look at the bottom of detail 2, we've left a 3-foot space between the proposed building and the neighbor's building. There's an existing easement that way, and the developer has asked us to keep it 3 feet away, which makes it a good thing for the neighbors. I'd like to move on to sheet SP 201, the next sheet over. This sheet is the grading and utility plan. The first thing I want to bring to the board's attention is on detail 1, there are some arrows that point into the building at the front and into the building at the back. From an engineering perspective, we often try and accommodate handicap accessibility. As the building is today, when you go to the front of the building, both the retail space and the entrance to the second floors have steps right there. That would be a very difficult problem to solve, even though it's possible, to make them handicap accessible, because you can't go out into the street, to the public right-of-way, so what you would have to do is open up the ground. You'd have to remove a portion of the ground floor to get either a ramp or some other way to get you in, and then there would have to be an elevator somehow put in the building. Not just for the retail. The retail is not accessible right now, and there's a slight slope in the ground, which makes it even more difficult to get the left side of the building, west side, the north side done. So the proposed solution, both at the front, the west part of the building, and at the right, the rear part of the building, is to have a design that's in full compliance, of course, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, where it's right at grade. And we've done the design so that there's two different grades, and they both go in at the right elevation. That leads then into the grading of this property, leads then into our stormwater management study. So I would also refer the board to a stormwater management study that I prepared on January 8th, 2026.
And that was filed with the board.
Yes, it was. In summary, the entire site is covered with impervious area, and it will be continued to be covered with impervious area. The results of my analysis from a drainage perspective were that the post-development flow would increase by 0.001 CFS, which is negligible. Basically, it's a covered site. There's existing conduit. We're replacing some of the conduit that's there on the back right of the property and putting new conduit in. So from a drainage perspective and from a stormwater management perspective, this is in essence a solution that will be provided if the application is approved from the building department, where you have to design roof drains, conduits coming down, and then coming out. In order to be sure that our solution will work, our office did video all of the utilities, the water, and the stormwater, and the sewer, and we're confident that the sewer will work, but the stormwater, we also have a suggestion to connect to the catch basin that's in the alleyway. It is our opinion that with brand-new pipes from the new building coming in, it will be an improvement to stormwater management. Furthermore, there is an existing electrical service on the southeast portion of the property. Our office has also communicated with these. Thanks. Our office has communicated with the utility, and we're in the process of arranging for a design and a load letter being accepted to permit for the electric to be on the eastern side of the property, close to where it is right now, underground as opposed to overhead. Our water is coming in where it comes in now. There's a 4-inch line there that is sufficient. And then there's an existing underground gas service that will remain. And we're also proposing to upgrade the 1-inch water line from Beechwood to a 2-inch water line. And we videotaped the 4-inch sanitary, and it is in good condition, and we would recommend that it remain. The rest of the information on the right-hand side of detail 2 I've testified to already through my drainage report, and has to do with drainage. So with that, I'd like to refer the board to sheet SP 302. This is a soil erosion sediment control plan.
Oh, sorry, is that 301?
I apologize, 301. Thank you, Council. This is the soil erosion and sediment control plan. If this were a much larger property that had an area of exposed soil, it would actually have to be approved by the another authority. In this point, it's less than 5,000 square feet. We are proposing that the existing inlets that discharge into the city system are covered, and you can see that on detail 1 of that sheet. And if necessary, we also have a standard detail on our drawings that would cause for a hay bale. But to put this simply, it's a small building. The process of demolition is not going to create a situation there where you could have any real soil wash away. There is a basement, so again, this will be more of a city construction type environment, but notwithstanding that, we've proposed protection for any runoff that could exist, that could happen. I'd like to move on to sheet SP 302. This sheet is the proposed site demolition plan. Basically, the building will have to be demolished. This shows the extent of demolition. It also shows something important, which are the 2 trees in the front. During the technical review committee, we did meet with the city forester, and his recommendation was to remove and replace those trees. So the applicant has agreed. That also has another benefit, which is makes construction easier without the older trees there, and also facilitates the installation of a sidewalk bridge, much like you would see in any downtown construction, which is shown on my detail number 2, to protect the safety of the public. This is common in New York City, obviously. You've seen these protective structures. And my final sheet that I will present on is sheet SP 401. Earlier, the developer did testify on the refuse. I'll get into a little bit more detail about that, but this sheet basically shows the site lighting, refuse, and that's about it. But if you look at the top right of sheet SP 401, you'll see the refuse calculations that we've done to confirm that the number of bins, which we estimate should be 4, are sufficient, and we've actually shown 6 on our drawings. The area is going to be shielded with 2 little screen walls on the north and to the south. If the board wants to, I can get into the details of it, but again, top right, you can read for yourselves. If there's any questions, I can answer them on the reason that we have so many bins. I could get into the site lighting, and if this was one of these large site plans with parking everywhere, I'd probably have to testify as a professional engineer. However, in this case, I would like to defer my testimony until the architect speaks, because the majority of lighting here is off a building. It has to do with the area that's being lit underneath the back, where we show the illumination here from anywhere from 0.1 to 3.2 foot candles. And also in the front entrance, we have illumination. But again, in terms of the upper level and the lower level, because it's part of the building, I think the architect will be able to provide you with a better idea of why illumination was provided in this way. Other than comments from your professionals, which I can respond to, that concludes sort of my review of the drawings.
I just have one question. I think that you addressed most of the board engineer's comments in your testimony. And anything not addressed will be addressed by the architect in his testimony. But can you go through the city engineer's comments?
Yes. So that would be the March 5th, 2026 letter, correct? Comment letter?
I'm not sure if it's March 5th.
So, in the third paragraph, the comment is that the replacement of the street trees should require approval of this office and the city forester to select a tree and tree well replacement since the existing well will likely be damaged during removal. We agree. That's a good idea, and we're appreciative that the trees are older and should be replaced. It makes things a lot easier. There's also a comment about the sidewalks, and given our experience in working in Summit and downtown, most of the material goes through and is delivered through the front of the building, and the sidewalks do suffer. And we again agree with the fact that construction will most likely need to replace it in whatever condition the board would ask. We would agree to that.
And then what about the comment regarding restoring the alley after repaving?
Absolutely. Yes. And again, the alley may again suffer because of the loads applied during deliveries. And again, the developers agreed to restore it to a condition that's satisfactory to the city.
Or coordinate an alternate option, because I think what he's saying is that they're proposing to repave it in the summer of 2026. So either have them hold off on that portion, or something that works with the city engineer will be coordinated.
That would be ideal.
If there's no more questions, unless the board has questions.
Do we have any questions from our experts?
Sure. Yeah, I think you've taken care of a lot of what was in my letter. But in hearing some of what the developer was discussing and your testimony, could you talk a little bit more about the garbage pickup during construction? The alleyway might be closed off. How would access to the alley for the garbage truck to get other buildings in that alley be accomplished?
That's something that we've thought about, and during construction, there will have to be a heightened level of communication with both the city and the adjacent property owners to make sure that when that alley has to be closed for certain construction activities, that it's well coordinated and prepared. Again, we have some experience doing this in the city of Summit. A lot of the deliveries do come from the front, and we've had experience in having to reserve and pay for parking spaces that are directly in front of the sites that we construct. In most cases, debris is taken out that way, and dumpsters are cordoned off and put in the front of properties, usually. So again, it's going to be a construction coordination to make sure that everybody's informed, and that when the building has to be serviced from the side easement, that everybody is aware of it. It's a construction means and methods coordination matter.
Okay. On your, the lighting plan that you were just talking about, that, the dumpster enclosure detail, I don't know that I had noticed before, but if you're going to have the board-on-board visual screening around those, if there's cars parked in those parking spaces, then the garbage cans can't come out, those bins can't come out to be loaded into a garbage can after construction is completed. Am I
There's
right
al-
on that?
Yeah, there's only a cheek wall on each side, so we didn't enclose the front of it.
Okay,
So it's only the sides. There was, because you're right, if you did put swinging doors, you would never be able to. So that's why
you just put a screening across the sides of
Yes,
it?
yeah.
Okay,
So again, it's behind the building. It's not visible from the street.
right,
We felt that the best way to have a car in a tight spot and those bins is to have many small ones, not a few big ones, and to be able to take them out that way.
okay.
Oh, I think the applicant is going to respond.
Sure.
Sure. If I could. So garbage pickup in the CRBD is typically done by 6 AM. So we don't anticipate there would be any cars
Okay,
associated with our building in that lot. So whatever Mr. Tapasero talked about in terms of the design of the enclosure, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of conflict with trash pickup and recycling at that hour in the morning.
great, thank you. And I don't know if this is something that maybe the architect would talk about, but was there any consideration given to bollards at the location? of
Yes.
The
I-
parking, the
yes.
tandem parking areas?
And we did struggle with this internally in our office. There was a big debate about it. And it was my professional opinion that in this particular case, they would be in the way and create a worse situation. It's too tight of a space. If anything bad happens, that cheek wall might get hit, but I think that putting bollards there would just make it so much more difficult, and all you would be protecting is a plastic bin. So, it was my opinion, but again, others can decide, not me, but it was my opinion not to put the bollards there. A bollard, by the way, regardless of where you put it, has to be designed a certain way. So this would have to be 4 feet, I think 4 feet deep and 3 feet high. It's meant for somebody really hitting it. You'd never get the velocity here to even use the bollard. I think that most people, by the time they make the turn into the back of the parking lot, are going to be slow anyway. And so, in summary, I wanted to give the vehicle and the plastic containers some room and some space. But again, we're not opposed to, if bollards, if the engineering department and your opinion is that bollards should be there, I would certainly be amicable to adjusting, for sure.
Well, I think we had actually spoken about this during the TRC, so I just kind of wanted to put it on the record that it was considered, that you had thought about it, and that was your opinion, that it was going to be more of a hindrance than anything else. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that we discussed that. I think you already talked about the sidewalk replacement, construction sequencing. Would we be talking about roof-mounted mechanical equipment with the architect? Okay, I'll hold off on that. Okay, I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Just a few questions to follow up. This is more of a comment than a question. I think I had missed the extent to which tandem parking is permitted by ordinance. I just don't know if that technically raises a compliance question. That's the existing configuration. I'm just addressing it now because I know you have subsequent professionals, so
I
just a
don't see
technical
anything in
concern.
the ordinance that prohibits tandem parking.
I think it's silent on it. I'm just
Yep.
raising it's a question in my mind at this point, so I just wanted to point that out. And again, I'm not taking issue with the functionality. I think Mr. Yeager addressed how it would all work with the tenants. It's just wanted to point that out. Just going to go through I did have one comment about lighting in our memo pertains to the terrace lighting. It's wall mounted. I believe it's carriage lighting. Is that something you'd testify to, or the architect? As far as impacts? Okay, that's fine. There's an existing utility pole that appears to be on the property based on the survey. And when I was out to the site today, it seems like there's a lot going on there from a connection standpoint, as well as a light that I guess services the alley. I did not see that replicated on the plan anyway. Do you have?
Yes.
Do you know how it's going to be addressed?
Yes, we have had conversations with the utility, and although we also thought it was major, there's not much that it's doing. And they've agreed that it's going to be removed, and we're going to go underground with a better service. So, although we also agreed that it looked more substantial, it wasn't.
Yeah, fair. And the alley light, though, is there a need to replace the illumination in the alley from a safety access perspective? Because it looks like it might illuminate, you know, obviously your property's access, but maybe adjacent property.
We could certainly, I defer that to the architect that's off the building, but we'd be open to any further commentary at the time.
Just raising it as a safety question, not
Yep.
pertinent necessarily to the application.
We tried to keep the number of foot candles to a minimum at the property line. I think we already have
Right.
one on the east that's a little high.
Okay.
So again, if more light is better, we could.
Something to
do
think
that.
about, okay.
Yep.
And then finally, you testified as an engineer. Are you also testifying as a structural engineer based on your analysis?
Yes.
I guess I just have a few general questions, and the question would be maybe, would you be able to elaborate on some of the structural issues? I think that's, you know, one of the board's main concerns, is that you touched on the floors sagging and some foundation issues. Is there any opportunity to elaborate, or maybe utilize the photos in your report to help with your commentary in that regard? I just think it's one of the more significant aspects of the application.
I think that's a good suggestion. If I could direct the board to my report dated December 29th, 2025, I think one of the photographs that would be most illustrative are photo 3, photo 4, and one that I feel is the most important is photo 11. I'll wait for the board to get there. So if the board were to see photo 11, that is at the back right of the building, and the foundation has undergone settlement. The facade has a step crack in photo 4. Now, as a structural engineer, we know how to read what cracks mean. Certain cracks say a different story, right? So a step crack at the top right of a building is indicative of settlement of the foundation. That's one clue that I saw, was that the top right had settled. That made me want to look deeper, and that's when I went to the back right and saw photo 11. So one thing that's happening is that the building has settled. It has, one part has settled differently than another. When that happens, the loads that were intended to go from side to side of the building start to then go where their nature is taking them. In structures, we often don't just sit in a room running calculations. We have to see what the building will do when it starts to settle. What I can tell you has started to happen in this building is that the interior non-load-bearing partitions that existed over 100 years ago are now holding the load of the roof. Over the years, what people do, over 100 years, what people do is that they need an opening. So they'll make an opening. There's no column that was put in. I struggled trying to even understand the inside of that building, and to give the developer an open area that I felt comfortable with. And in fact, the only way to really do that is, because I don't have x-ray vision, only from what I can see visually in the ceiling tile that I popped, is to start construction and to demolish everything. I mean, if I wanted, because there is no room for guessing in structures. I could not tell you today what's going on until you abate the asbestos. I can get in there and I'll put my eyes on all of the structure, not a bit of it, so that I can sign off on public safety. And it's complicated in there. You know, there's an apartment next to an office that somebody needed to put together, and then all of that has to go through two existing tenants. Where are the columns going to go? So again, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's not an easy solution to put a modern office, an open office concept, or even a less congested office concept there. So structurally speaking, the building has issues on the outside. It has differential settlement on the inside. The floors have settled. And the partitions, many, many, many little partitions that are there, have all started to work together to take the load that they shouldn't be taking.
I have a question for you on photo 11.
Yes.
When I look at this photo...
Mr. Chanchuli, you just use the mic.
When I look at photo 11, I mean, the foundation is clearly cracked, but in my opinion, when I look at this, this crack doesn't transfer up into the brick. So to me, it's, you know, a typical foundation crack, and it doesn't appear to be that serious to me. I spent 10 years as a home inspector, and to me, this looks like a typical foundation crack, which isn't transferred. I mean, if it was that bad and it was unstable, I would expect to see some travel up into that brick, and I don't see that. No, I'm talking about in photo 11.
But photo 4 is above it, is
No.
above on the front.
Photo 11 is in the back on the
No,
alley.
11 is in the back right, but the
Yeah,
fact
yeah,
that,
but I'm asking you about this photo right here.
yes.
I mean, to me, that doesn't appear to be that serious.
No, it's differential settlement in the back. From the inside, you can see the cracks from the inside in the foundation.
Yeah, I understand that, but when I'm saying it to you, if this was unstable, I would expect to see some step cracking going up into that brick, and I don't see that.
There is, right to the top right, there are.
I
Look
think
carefully
that-
above
I
it.
think that the printout might be
Yeah,
a little
there
less
are.
quality than if you zoom in on it, if you were on your computer.
You can see to the top right. Look above the.
Oh, okay, I see, I think I faintly see it now.
Yeah. But what, again, I would say in response to your question is that type of evidence where you cannot see it probably occurred on the front right and caused the step cracking at the top right, that's at the top of the building, right? That didn't happen because a lintel is bad. It didn't happen. See, again, if you look at photo 4, it goes from the top to the middle to the foundation. That didn't happen that way because the foundation didn't
What
move.
photo are you looking at?
Look at photograph 4. And if you look at photograph 4 carefully, you'll see a step crack at the top above the arch. Can I approach?
We can point to it, yeah.
It's okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is above,
Can you please speak into the microphone for the record?
yeah. Okay, yeah.
So I basically pointed to photograph 4, which is the top right of the building. And if you look at photograph 4 carefully, there is a step crack at the top right.
Maybe turn that around and just point to,
Yeah, I see it.
you can see.
There's a step crack at the top right, but that's not only the step crack. There's another step crack below that on the second floor. As a professional structural engineer, I can say that step cracks are not the best cracks to have. And they didn't happen in a vacuum at the top and middle of a building. It starts where the building hits the earth. And again, to be clear, I'm not saying that if you asked me to, like I've done before, I couldn't design a strapping system like I put in my letter to reinforce it. Or, my opinion is to put helical piles in the back, because for that to have moved, it means that it lost its soil-bearing capacity. For this step crack to have occurred, it means that there was zero bearing capacity. I know it's, everybody says, well, the building didn't collapse. Well, it doesn't matter. It settled. And so,
In photo 11, can you just show the crack that moves up into the brick so everybody can see it?
yes. Photo 11. Is at the bottom, And the crack is pretty apparent here at the bottom of photograph 11, but it does continue up.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, although I couldn't see it because it's covered from years of paint and plaster and repairs that they've made. It's been concealed, in my opinion, in the front. That's why I can't see this happening in the front. You can't get to it.
All the detail in these.
Can we just, I just want to make sure Tom is we're kind of going to forget to get the rest of Tom's questions possibly.
I'm done. I think you're
Okay,
you're
just
answering
wanna
the
make
line.
sure.
Well, I'm done, but I do have one more comment / question. So, you're going through your structural conditions analysis as I requested. Could you just explain what a helical pile is, just so we understand what that involves?
So that would be a solution. If the building were to be kept and restored, my advice would be to take the back right of the building, that crack, this crack in particular, right? There's different solutions for doing this, but a helical pile is a way to reinforce the back, to reinforce the building by almost taking like a corkscrew. You know when you open up a bottle of wine and you have a corkscrew that you put in? So there, what you have to do is dig it out until you get to the bottom of the footing, and then in this particular case, you might put 3 or 4 of these helical screw jacks in until you can't screw it anymore, and then when it comes to the top of it, you pour some concrete and you engage the bottom of the footing. It's not going to look any better, but it's cosmetic. You basically are able to stop the damage. You can never really fix this. It's a shame that it happened. I mean, it's a shame that the back happened, but the more difficult part to fix is what I have on 4. But so to answer your question, helical piles would be one way to fix the back, and that's a screw jack, and there'd be 3 of them. Just to be clear, I don't have an elegant answer for how to fix the front.
So all of these deficiencies in the building were evident from a cursory visual inspection, so I'm gathering from your testimony?
Yes, but I also went inside. I popped ceiling tile. I tried to do some minor invasive exploration. But again, the only way to know 100% is to remove it.
So in your experience, when people are doing historic, or rehabs of historic properties and going forward with a preservation mindset, will they employ these techniques, putting aside the increased cost associated with them?
I think that it really depends on the inside use. It depends on what you want to do on the inside of a property, how the property is going to live. Structure is one thing, and if your question to me is isolated only to structure, I don't know if I could answer it, because in most cases, what I design as a structural engineer has to go with a potential use on the inside. How many columns, what kind of spacing? What's going to happen to the inside of an adaptive reuse or historic restoration, and then I'm able to design the structure accordingly. Sometimes you see things that are stitched together that still have a inside that doesn't function. So
If I'm to understand it correctly, so you would look at a different solution associated with an office use where you'd want
yes.
like very limited columns infiltrating the office, as opposed to a multifamily use where you might be able to accommodate more partitioning in the interior.
Correct.
Gotcha, thank you.
I'm going to repeat the question I asked the developer in expectation that there'd be a professional engineer or architect able to better answer it. You started by saying that the interior partitions that are now potentially holding up some part of the roof load weren't necessarily designed to do that. The developer mentioned that they were placed, his word, randomly. I'd like to understand better where they are, because there's no drawing that shows where they are currently. At least I haven't seen one. There's no interior existing condition plan on any of the levels. So I don't understand why they couldn't be maintained, asbestos notwithstanding, and still create a functional interior for the purpose that the developer has in mind, not the existing purpose. And the question particularly concerns alignment. If they were randomly placed and don't align floor to floor, not to question your assumption that they are holding up some part of the load, but how are they doing that if they don't align? And that makes them not quite random.
So as part of our analysis, we did have the building measured. We had a third party go in there and measure everything. It's a good question because I was trying to figure it out. I tried to see where the loads were lining up. I tried to expose the roof to see where it was going. I made an assumption from the top based on the partitions, and there's no rhyme or reason. The stair goes up the middle, then the stair goes to the right, and so it's a honeycomb in there, and it's a good observation. The third floor does not translate well to the second floor.
Yeah.
There's a main stairwell that goes up, and then the stores seem to be kind of open below, right? I then go to the basement. The basement is kind of shallow, and there's several spines that go front to back, and that's it. Then the beams run horizontally, very, very shallow. So I could not come up with a logical reason of how the roof translated into the third floor framing, second floor framing. We used the existing partitions that we had the third party put together, and it's my professional opinion that the only way that this is holding up without having seen or measured the beams is that they've all engaged and sit in the middle of things everywhere. In my opinion, the only way to do it is to start to rip it apart, remove the asbestos, rip it apart, see where the beams are, and there's deflection. I mean, usually I don't like to see more than, quarter of an inch here or there. There's 2 or 3 inches in certain areas of deflection, and with my experience, it's not normal that is that way. When you dig up from underneath and you expose a piece, in some cases, you'll see that the original connection, which in this case is probably mortise and tenon, right? It's probably not even put together with structural clips, hasn't engaged, and it goes onto some wall. So I wish I could answer with a high degree of certainty as to how it engaged, but it's there, it's deflected, and in my opinion, the partitions that exist they have to be taking the load down. I mean, I saw it. There's partitions that don't line up, and they're taking it down to the floor. So to fulfill the architectural charge of having an office in there, how do you know what to take down? And how would you make an opening if you don't know that when you make a wider opening, you have to put two, say we made life simple and made a 6-foot opening somewhere, which is not what the client wanted, but you minimize and don't open the whole thing up. If you make a 6-foot opening, you're concentrating loads on each side of that 6-foot opening. You've got to make sure that you look below. The mistake that a lot of people make sometimes and carpenters make is that they only look above. And they don't look at where the loads go. The load has to get to the earth. And so point loads then would have to go from the second floor to a retail facility and down to the basement. I hope I'm answering the question. I don't know if I am, but
Yeah. I'm an architect and I
so you
teach in an
understand.
engineering
Okay.
school, so civil engineer, so
So you understand.
structural engineer. So I do understand what you're saying, and the question is kind of loaded. Just picking up on the prior question, if the developer had come to you, and he said he did, and to your colleague, with a preservation mindset, that let's try to do everything we can to save a contributing building in the historic district, would your advice have been, maybe this is too hypothetical a question, is it within the realm of possibility at no significantly greater cost to preserve all or part of the building, in your professional opinion?
I could not answer that question because I don't think there is an expert born yet that has X-ray vision that would know what they would find when they started to open up. So,
So let's take the front facade, for example. I understand the cracks. I went to look at the building today and I saw them. I didn't go in the back. I should have. I didn't want. But if the facade were significantly important as a contributing element in the historic district, without any implied denigration of the facade that we're looking at in the replacement, potential replacement, could it be part of a hybrid, let's call it, project where there's significant demolition, which makes, yes, the asbestos easier, it certainly would make the heights different. I fully understand the developer's concern about floor levels as they relate to the existing windows. But as you've expressed, and is evident, on the ADA compliance aspect of your report and the discussion, a demolition of interior floor levels would also help to partially rectify that. There might not be perfect alignment. Many existing adaptive reuse projects don't have windows that look logical and, in terms of what the prior floor levels were. And there could also be some accommodation made without going into the details of how that's done. You know it, and I do. All that to say, in your professional opinion, can the facade be retained?
I don't think so in this case. And you're speaking to a member of a Historic Preservation Commission member in the Village of Ridgewood, so that's not what I'm testifying as
Yeah.
here today. I'm a structural engineer here and a civil.
Yeah.
And we do adaptive reuse projects. I'm not saying that it is impossible. However, in this particular case, with the floor levels, with the ADA accessibility, with an attempt to try and extract the glue that is putting together the inside structure from the facade and prying it away on a structure that's already cracked, and it'd be hard. I think that I've seen these things done in the city. I've never done one like that, but in my professional opinion, in this case, it's either one or the other, right? And I think that if one tried to keep this fragile facade, albeit at the wrong heights as a civil engineer in the front, and trying to attach a building to it afterwards, because lateral stability would have to be done somehow, right? I'd have to somehow make a connection on old brick. I would struggle with how to connect it. Again, would I be able to figure something out? Perhaps, but nothing comes to mind right now that would be a solution where I could take that old facade and connect the lateral loads into the building carefully. I'd have to think about it.
Well, thanks for your candor. Thank you.
Want to follow up to
yeah.
this line of questioning? When we were talking about all those solutions to shore up the building while you investigated, is there a material likelihood that after doing that investigation, you would come to the conclusion that the building itself was not salvageable?
That question comes with money, and I'm not prepared to answer that. If money was no object, and you wanted to keep the existing building, structurally, one can stabilize something, but it will not be a product that is level unless you fake the levelness and you make it level. And we've had these discussions with our client. And one thing that was compelling, because we did try, right? We did try. The initial plan was to try. At the end of the day, the product would be, I forget the exact word our client used, but it would not be a product that anybody would want inside after we were done with all of these connections, reinforcements on the inside.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a
Can I ask him just one more
Yeah.
question? In your professional opinion, are you saying that none of these structural deficiencies could be corrected with steel?
They can, sure. I'm not saying that if I were hired to reinforce a building, one could do it. I am not declaring this unsafe or unsalvageable, but the question is, if you look at photograph 4, how would you reinforce that that one. I mean,
Well, I'm talking about how you're referring to the, the sagging and the floor loads. I mean, steel eliminates all that.
you would still have a floor that would have to be packed in to become level. Your final product would have to be leveled. So assuming you could reinforce structurally the underside of the building with flitch plates or any other means, or new beams, new connections, right? Figure out where the load is going. The product at the end would not be flat. You wouldn't be able to jack this thing back up to its original condition. You would only be able to stop it from moving. And so I would never be able to guarantee our client what he wants, which is a flat floor that doesn't creak. If you were to do that, you could only do it cosmetically. Afterwards, you'd have to go and put plywood, layers of plywood onto something to try and get it to look flatter, but you'll never get it to be, this building will never be, unless it's completely removed, right? But to try and keep that existing structure and not have to explain why there's dips, it'll be, I don't think that that's possible without extensive cosmetic work after you've reinforced the structure.
I have questions. So, since it is a historic structure, aren't there state and federal resources, experts out there, and I know there is money out there, to help reinvest into these historic structures and to preserve them? Wouldn't if you were tasked with that, to save as much as you can of the existing structure, whether or not be whether it be the building or just the facade, I would think if that's not part of your expertise, you'd be able to use these resources, like I said, state and federal level, with the funding to help with this project. Is there a reason why that wouldn't be?
I think that's a question better for the developer council. I haven't looked into programs. I mean, I've heard that there's tax credits, but that's not my area of expertise. Every historic restoration that I have done, and there have been many, some that have been demolished, some that have not been with those programs. They've been without the benefit of those programs. So I'm sorry, but either the developer or somebody else can answer or
Okay.
get back to you.
And then I have another question. Is this A1, is this your
Yes.
exhibit? Is that an accurate image, photograph of what it would be like standing across the street on Beechwood, looking at the building?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just confused, because you said that the fourth floor is really not really visible because it's stepped back. I think it's very visible from this angle. Is there a way that it could have been, like, this is across the street, you do see that whole floor. I was expecting at this angle to not be able to see anything, because it would be so far back. If I guess there's some sort of overhang that's really protruding along the front? Like-
So the front is about 11 feet back from the building, but 16.4 feet from the property line. So we took as much as we could from the most visible side, which was Beechwood. So from this side, you're right, you do see the side. The side, we only set back about a foot, the side, right? So this is, are you referring to the?
I'm talking about the whole gray third floor. It is very visible from the way you explained it, and then when you look at the
Fourth floor or third floor?
the fourth floor. The fourth floor, the way you explained it is that, it's going to be stepped back, so it's not visible. If this is the street view, I think it's very visible from there, from this angle. Is there a way to make it so that you do not see any of that fourth floor from the street level?
The problem is that without exceeding the FAR, we tried to take the volume from the back and just take that volume without asking for another variance. So to keep the FAR at 3, that's what you wind up with. It's a good question, and any farther back, you would go less than what we currently have, which is about 300 feet or so, approximately less than what's permitted. So, and that's, we did it for good reason, like what you said. We wanted at least to have 11-foot balcony, but if you do any more, then you can't get the space.
What's permitted for the FAR, just to tag along to that question? I think it's, one of the things that I'm sort of struggling with is that it's really not about the FAR. It's about 3 stories. That's what's permitted. So it doesn't matter that you're below the FAR, you're 1 story above. And even without that story, if you were to remove it, it's still a bigger building than it was before. So it's the conversation is making it sound like what's making it 4 stories is that, we're moving things around. That's from like the maximum building if you were going to build it 3 stories, which is still an option, correct? To just build 3 stories and maximize your FAR in 3 stories. That is still an option.
I wouldn't answer that. That's
Right.
a question for the.
I mean, it's an option when you're planning a new building. That's the point, right? It's a choice to keep the parking versus maximize the FAR and stay within the number of allowed stories.
The other, if I understand you correctly, the other choice would be build it to 3.0 FAR at 3 floors. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not, again,
Yeah.
that's not the application here this evening, but 3.0 would be a 0 lot line, 3 times the area of the property, which would be more than this building.
About 300 square feet, you said before.
Well,
something
more,
like
more
that.
because we also chose not to, I didn't mention this earlier, but there's an angle on the property. The city street on the side, the alleyway, is at an angle. So we chose to make it orthogonal, thereby losing that strip. So theoretically, a little more complicated structure, but you could make the building taper a little bit and then get 3.0. There's a way. But again, it takes away from a 3-foot offset for the benefit of the neighbors. It takes away from an orthogonal building. And it takes away from our clients, as a civil engineer, charge of trying to at least keep 2 tandem spaces. So that's the.
Sorry, Allison, did you have any
No.
other? Okay.
I have a somewhat related question, and I'm sorry that you're getting peppered by questions that might be better asked of the developer, but it's a pretty simple one. Who owns the alley? Is the alley part of
The
this
city
lot?
of Summit.
The city of Summit. I should know that. Thank you.
Any?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about these cracks. So this is a wood frame building with a brick facade?
Yes.
So technically speaking, the brick facade is not structural. The
It
wood's
is,
holding the building up.
It is structural because there's a wind load, there's seismic, there's wind. It's not seismically
So
braced. the
if
building.
the brick were to fall down, the wood frame would remain? Or would the whole thing fall down? Is there a gap between the facade and the structure?
We'll leave that for the architect, but
Okay,
I
I wasn't
would.
sure. You're the engineer, so I thought you would have
But to
known
be
that.
clear, I have not seen, and that's what I testified to before, and I'm not going to guess. Structural engineers don't like to guess. I have not, with my own eyes, seen the connection, all the connections between the facade and the inside, and until I see that, I don't know.
Because usually facades sit on a steel ledger, right?
No,
The
no,
bricks-
not
brick
this
facade?
one. Not this one.
So
No, not
how
this
how
one.
does the brick facade rest? Is it on a footing?
Based on my experience, it rests on a rubble, it rests on a stone, not rubble, it's a stone round footing, foundation wall that comes up. It's about 20 inches thick. The brick then rests on that, and the old heavy timbers are pocketed into the
The brick.
facade. Yeah. But there's no steel in the facade, in my
Right, right.
opinion. But for those step cracks to occur, I would want to see how that engages and how the loads are transferred, not just the vertical loads,
So
but.
that kind of goes to
but
my
the wind.
question. The structure, the wood frame, could theoretically be fine, and the facade is what's moving.
Except that if
Mortar
you-
could be worn away by rain
Except
and
if
weather.
you go inside, the floors are dipping everywhere.
Buildings.
They do.
How
They
old? Almost 200 years old? Well, the one next door is 1892, so let's just
Yeah.
assume it's 100 and something years old. I mean, there was construction done, well, let's not get into that. I'm trying to figure out how this facade is considered structural, other than the attaching points that are holding the facade to the wood frame. There might be L brackets, they might be star,
Yes.
I don't think there's any star hold compressors in there, things like that. So
Every-
while we're touting that there's cracks in the facade, I'm struggling with the fact that you really haven't talked about the structure of the building itself, other than the corner in the back where the foundation is. We all know well, I built a house in town, and I really shouldn't say this, but cracks happen. You know, it happens, it just happens. And I kind of see water intrusion in the back from poor maintenance of the gutters, the facade crack in the crown molding. That looks like it's wood, not part of the structure. So that happens on every building. I'm just trying to get my hands around the frame of the building is wood frame. I'm 99.9% sure of that. The facade is attached to that wood frame. So the facade can be removed and the structure could be reinforced, so to speak. But I'm not an engineer, I don't know. I'm just trying to get my hands around, we're touting how these cracks are structural, but I think they're structural in the facade, not the structure of the building. Other than the settlement of the floors, which the building's 180-something years old. My math, I was never good at math. So, but it's a pretty old building. I mean, my father had a house in town, and the floors, you dropped the marble, it went zoom, right? The new person who bought the house fixed it.
So I can tell you that this facade is not a curtain wall.
Okay?
It's not an independent architectural element. It is part of the structure. It takes the lateral loads when the wind blows and transfers them into a horizontal diaphragm of wood that is made up of heavy timbers, plywood, and stuff like that.
But is it
So
supporting the roof?
It is, and it could be supporting some of the deck of the roof, maybe not the entire roof, and there's a pocket there. There's a pocket in the front, and the spine runs front to back on this
Right.
building. So, and the structure runs left to right, so we know that the brick takes it
Okay.
in the pockets. But in this type of vintage, the facade is part of the building. It's,
Okay.
again, I have to repeat, it's not a curtain wall. It has to take the wind load, it has to take the seismic load, and then transfer that to the floors, from the floors into the earth. So separating them in this case is a hard one.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Curran, did you have any questions? I think I have two. One is related to the soils beneath the building. What do you know about what lies beneath the building? Is it clay? Is it, what do we have there?
We
Did you
had
do
a
any borings?
Yes, we had a geotechnical report done, and the soil is fairly solid at approximately, now this is from, I don't have it in front of me, but it's about 20 feet or so. It's very strong. Up until 8 or so feet, it's somewhat loose. And then we have approximately, and we're still waiting for the part of the geotechnical report, but I think we have approximately 3 tons per square foot at the proposed footing at the bottom. So it's not that bad. The soils are not that bad. We did one boring at the center of the proposed parking lot.
And so for the proposed new building, will there be, I'm asking this because I'm wondering what kind of structural support will be required for that building? Will that have helical piles? I
No,
mean,
no, that's
what
a
kind?
great question. So I've designed the structure of the proposed building. The proposed building will have, beginning with the basement, a 20 or so inch thick reinforced concrete wall poured on the inside. We don't want to mess with too much of the old rubble. Basically, it's useless, right? So upon demolition, there will be an interior wall poured that's thick, that will take the load from a proposed structural steel and metal deck system. We're going to take the second floor and cantilever it over, and as one of your fellow board members said, a modern system, more like a curtain wall, is going to hang a galvanized angle and then put the brick and the facade that you see on that way. So these will be on galvanized angles, but the primary structural system will consist of brand-new, independent spread footings in the middle, concrete footings in the middle, a continuous wall footing around the perimeter that's fairly thick. The columns will go on that, and then after we get to the top, they cantilever over, and you build the building. So it's independent. It's as if the old stuff didn't exist anymore.
And how deep are those footings?
Great question. So you have to be very careful before you begin to look at your adjacent structures. We've been and we'll go into the adjacent basements. We measure the bottom of footings. We estimate the bottom, so you never go below the bottom of footing around the other properties. You could, but in this case, we are not recommending that we underpin either the building to the left or behind it. The elevator, proposed elevator in this building doesn't go to the basement, so that's by design, so that we don't have to go below the bottom of the footing on any of the adjacent properties. So as long as you go to the bottom of the footing, you should be safe. Our specifications for the structure include a requirement that if this is approved, that our consultant will come out upon excavation to confirm that the basement is of sufficient load-bearing capacity, as sort of like a belt and suspenders, to confirm that we have 3 or 5 tons per square foot to put our new footings on. Because right now there's a building there. So
I guess one of my reasons for asking that is, one, if you could put helical piles, if you need helical piles under one building, in the existing building, I was wondering if you needed them for the new building. But the other one is obviously the structural stability of the surrounding buildings. I mean, the deeper you excavate, the more likely you are to impact the stability of those buildings around you, which is a concern. Keeping a structure in sight and in place and putting a helical pile under it is less likely to impact the neighboring building than a deep excavation, depending on what you're doing with the foundation. So that was, and we typically do get like structural drawings for something of this scope, but there were no structural drawings. So I don't even know if we're asking Marie might have other structural questions. I don't know all the questions that we might have asked if we had seen a drawing, but seeing as there aren't, I'm just taking a stab at some of the questions that we might have asked. The other one is related to, in downtown Summit, are there any buildings that we're aware of where they've had to do, jackhammering or, blasting or anything? I know we don't allow blasting, but jackhammering to get your foundation work done? Because I know it's happened in some neighborhoods in Summit. And again, that would impact the surrounding buildings.
So before we do anything, and we've done some of these in the city of Summit already, we painstakingly go to every property around us before we start construction, and we take photographs and measure any cracks, foundation cracks, water, and so we clearly document everything on the basements of the buildings around us. We've done this on 475 Springfield, for example. Again, it's very important for me to reiterate that upon excavation, my design as it stands today does not go below the bottom of footing of any of the adjacent buildings, which in structures is a good thing because we're not proposing to underpin the building to the left or underpin the building to the back. You're correct when a proposed building has a need for a deeper basement, and then you have to underpin, which we've done before. Underpinning is not difficult, especially here in Summit, because the soils are quite tight, and do well with underpinning, but again, that's not contemplated here. I hope I've answered your question in that the existing stuff is basically staying so it doesn't get removed, it doesn't matter, and a brand-new independent system not below or in any way affecting the adjacent structure. So one more thing, again, without being repetitive, the code, and that was something that I believe was testified to earlier, requires an engineer to look at the adjacent structures before, and part of that consent, I think, is what we've also always done is to confer with the adjacent property owners and to make sure that the proposed construction does not in any way exacerbate an existing condition or, make it worse. So that's all part of doing construction next to existing buildings. I hope I've answered your question. Again, we're not going below the footings.
Okay. And I guess the second question I have is, sort of related to other questions that have come to the board, from the board, starting with Mr. Chanchuli and sort of the load supporting beams. If you keep just the exterior structure and you demolish everything on the inside because your goal is to just preserve the streetscape, could you design this where it doesn't matter anymore, you don't have any floors, doesn't matter that they're not level, you could start over from the inside? Could you, you had suggested that you could by like when you said, if you wanted to make the, entrance ADA compliant, you would have to demolish the stairs and, put an entrance. Well, if it were a blank slate and just somebody said this is a box that you have to work with, could you design an interior to the building that would be structurally sound?
I'm not quite sure I understand. But,
so if you demolished,
keep the facade.
I live in a house that is not, not labeled on the historic registry, but it's a historic looking house in a neighborhood. And when we renovated it, we pretty much gutted the inside of the house, but intentionally kept the outside of the house to keep with the streetscape. And you can start, you can start, if you did something like that and you just had an open box, with this building, do you think you could design something within the current just footprint and maybe add on the back?
And keep which facade? Keep just the front?
The front door and the front and the side, if you were going to keep that look. Just keep the exterior and demolish the interior. Knowing that you have to do asbestos abatement either way, that's going to happen either way. You can't just, if you demolish it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you cannot just go and demolish the whole building because you still have to go in and remove all the asbestos first, which you would have to do if you were renovating as well. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. The building currently can be occupied. I think the removal of asbestos is required when you touch it.
Right, when you demolish a building that
Correct,
has
yeah.
asbestos in
Or
it, you can't
if you were
just
to
demolish the building, you have to do, because you're letting the fibers out into the people in the street, right?
So if you were to renovate the building, you would still have to selectively remove asbestos if you were opening it.
Right, I understand that. So what I'm saying is, you have to, let's just say you have to remove the asbestos anyway. Regardless of what you do, you have to remove the asbestos. So you've done that, now you've gutted the whole building. With what you have on the outside, could this, just the exterior be used? Put in supporting beams, so that you can get your design that you want, open spaces, whatever you want. Could you use the exterior of this building to make,
As my professional opinion as a structural engineer, but I'll extend into, I've already been qualified as an architect. The answer is no. I think it's either one or the other. I think that if you tried to take an existing facade that has a step crack on the third level, on the second level, that you can see, and a foundation, and tried to gingerly and selectively and carefully extract from it the beams that are resting on it, in my opinion, as also as a contractor, again, I haven't been qualified as such, but you will mutilate that facade in the process. And I think it'll be very difficult for a person like me to certify it without starting it and trying to do it and seeing what comes up. These are filled with surprises, and I see certain signs that the surprises might not be that easy to resolve. So to answer your question, my opinion is, I don't think, at least my office would be capable of extracting the facade from the structure inside and meeting the goals that the developer has of a office building that, as an architect, would rent, would be needed.
And most likely the facade would not be saved, right? It would.
You would only know when you start to remove everything on the inside. A pocket, after 120 years, does not come out of that brick nicely. You would have to chip around it, shake the facade above your head, one that's already cracked. Again, it's a tough one to do in the way you're suggesting. A home is somewhat easier because if the outside is wood, it has more give and take perhaps, a home. But this particular building would be hard to remove one from the other. In my opinion, they go together.
Thank you.
So that kind of gets back to my question. If you were to strip the inside of this building down to the wood frame, all that's left is the 4 exterior walls and the wood frame on the inside. That would give you a better understanding of whether you could salvage what you have or not.
Yes, it would.
So with your preliminary review of the building, you said you removed some drop tiles on the 3rd floor. So what's the actual ceiling height on the 3rd floor?
About 8 feet or so.
With the drops, from the drop ceiling down or from the original ceiling down?
9'3" to the framing.
So there is an option. I know with commercial structures, we want to have, 10, 12-foot ceilings with the bar joists so we could run everything inside and be hidden and all that. But with a 10-foot, I'm sorry, what'd you say, 10 foot, 9 foot?
9'3".
You could theoretically run AC ductwork, electrical wires, communication wires, and hide them with it's doable. It's done all the time.
Including
again-
sprinklers.
And sprinklers, you could run
Yeah.
sprinklers.
But again, the ceiling would be at 7'6". If you
Well-
took 9 minus ductwork, you'd get down to a 7'6" ceiling. You wouldn't get to 8. 'cause
I'm not an expert, so I don't know.
Well,
I'll take your
usually,
word for
here's
it.
what we do.
But,
From clear structure, we always allot 2 feet. Would that be a fair number? So 2 feet minus 9'3" would leave you with a 7'3" clear office space.
Gotcha.
which-
Okay. That makes
which-
sense.
Yeah.
makes sense. But then, and I'm just asking questions. So so on the 3rd floor, you dropped some tiles, and you saw tin ceilings, whatever you saw. Is there room above those, or you don't know?
We don't know.
Is there a cock loft or attic space? Or
No.
No?
It's just layers of drop ceiling, other types of ceiling that are there, those with the holes in them.
Okay,
I think the applicant also wanted to respond to your comment.
okay, good.
Apologize. Thank you.
Okay.
So I just wanted to address the question about, if you stripped everything inside, left the walls, what would you be left with? And I think it's really important to understand what you'd be left with. You'd be left with a facade that has not just lots of cracks and fractures. You have rotting cornices that need to be dealt with. You've got pieces of brick that are missing and not compatible in terms of probably lots of patching work that's gone on over the years. You're going to need new windows. You have storefronts that, like I said, there's nothing historic or contextual about those storefronts. They've been modified many times over the years. And that's assuming you can still deal with the ADA compliance issue and the ceiling heights, because the windows, the position of the windows are what dictates floor heights. And I firmly agree. You're talking about ceiling heights less than 8 feet. That's not readily acceptable in any condition from an occupiable standpoint. So you go to all this work to try to figure out how to create a structure inside a box, to preserve a box that, at the end of the day, as I say, has very little historical context remaining. How many coats of paint, missing brick, rotted cornices, old cheap replacement windows, and a storefronts that don't really have any context. So I just think it's important, perspective-wise, to understand if you could do all this work, which I agree, I'm not a structural engineer. I think it would be very difficult to support exterior walls with no interior framing to try to figure that out. And what you're left with is, to me, a really compromised
Right.
exterior situation.
So here's what I'm struggling with. Downtown's declared a historical district. Not so much the buildings per se, but the district. So we're changing the face of that. I mean, I think it's a beautiful building, don't get me wrong. We're changing the face of that historical district from what it's based on. If we were to do this on every block, would we lose that historical district feel? That's kind of what I'm struggling with.
So if I can just jump in, I think that's why there's the historical preservation design guidelines, so that any new building can infill and match up with some of the existing historic buildings, which the architect is going to testify to as to why this meets all of those
Okay.
design
Great.
criteria, as well as the design guidelines in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but you're going for the extra height. It's not, I mean, for me, I could live with, the design of the building, it's the height. So you want that extra height. So to me, it's more like, it's something that you want, but you don't really need to have it. You're going through it, so why not do it? It's not something that's needed. So what changes the whole scope of the thing is the height of the building with that extra floor.
And I think
And
that-
I think the main driver of why you don't want to put the effort into restoration is because you mentioned the height of the basement. So I think you're looking for a higher basement height. That's what you said. You said that the basement was low and that you want to increase the height of the basement. So that would make it more difficult to preserve the facade of the building because you want to raise the height of the basement.
I apologize for that misunderstanding, but to be clear, the basement in the proposed building is staying at 7'0". We're not making it deeper. And the elevator's not going to go to the basement.
I thought you
It'll be
had said
dead, no, I
it was-
apologize.
it was
It's
too low.
going to be dead storage if anybody needs it. The developer has decided not to go deeper, and that goes with the chairwoman, vice chairwoman's suggestion that we're not digging adjacent to anybody's footings.
I have a question about the height. If the floors are, 9 feet 3 inches, right, times 3, that's 28 feet with a little bit of space between with, each story, a couple feet, right? That's 32 feet. This existing building is 41 feet. So it doesn't actually make sense to me that the maximum height is only 9 feet either. So there's something in the height that I think we're missing.
I think the first floor is different, but the architect do you want him to answer that now?
I
or
guess,
can
I
he-
guess we'll wait for the architect. There are other questions from the board? Oh, yeah, I'm waiting.
Apologize, sorry, I wanted to address this gentleman's question about the height. And if I understood it correct, I just want to make sure I framed the question correct, is that we're seeking the 4th floor and the height variance, and that's the driver behind wanting to do a new building?
Yeah,
Was that
I
the comment?
understand
I'm
that,
sorry?
but I thought he had mentioned that one of the problems was the basement height was very low, and I thought that was your intention, to try to increase your height of the basement.
No. And I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question the way that you're thinking about it, but in the new proposed building, we were going to create a new functional basement, the existing basement.
Same height?
Yeah, 'cause that's, I think the first floor is going to determine the depth and height of that basement, because we're not digging down. We're not going to lower that level of the basement floor because of all the structural underpinning reasons that Mr. Tapisaris alluded to. So we anticipate having the height of the basement the same. It's really dungeness down there right now. You wouldn't want to spend any time down there. So we'll make that as part of that new box that he was referring to, new. Does that answer the question, or is there something else
Well, yeah,
about the
except
fourth
that, I
floor?
don't have any numbers that I could look at to see what the basement height is now on the existing building and what the basement height will be
Yeah,
on the new
there's,
building.
yeah, there's no proposed change on the height of the basement. That's not a driver.
If you want to go to the elevation sheet, most important thing we're doing is making sure that from the sidewalk, you now go a little bit lower with the first floor, so it's handicap accessible, which will just basically make the basement 7'0".
Is that what it is now?
It's about 7'3", 7, it's a little higher, but by the time we take out that height when you walk in the front door, when you shave that out and the ground floor is flat, in fact, we'll lose some depth of the basement to 7'0", but the proposed design does not contemplate it making it deeper or.
Well, I understood that you couldn't make it deeper. I just thought you were trying to elevate the whole height of the building in order to accommodate. the height
Great
of the
question. So
basement.
again, to be clear with my answer, if anything, it's the other way around because we're eliminating steps that go up and so we're actually going the other way, digging into our space, into the basement, yeah.
No other questions from the board? Are there questions from the public? Please state your name and your address before you ask your question.
Caroline King, 38 Gloucester, and disclosure, I am Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. What I'd like to do is, because, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name properly. I'd just like to.
This is just for questions of
not
this
comments,
witness
right?
at this
Okay,
point.
it's not for comments, but it might help the question, because since he's the architect, and these are two photos from his website. So these are all questions based on, well, that he has these photos, and I think they're relevant because in his certification, right?
So is this for Mr.
Is
Tapisaris?
this for engineering or architecture? Because the architect hasn't testified yet.
Well, this would be engineering because on his website, he shows his portfolio, right? And he's
Okay.
chosen not that many photos on his website. And two of them are, I don't have any details on what he put, but two of them are historic. So from an engineering standpoint, the questions would be around, his past experience or what he's showing on his website as what appear to be, so I think without the picture it might be difficult, but I'm sure he knows what is on his website. But I thought it might be helpful for the board to see that. And it's
So
from his
typically,
engineering background.
If you're going to raise those points, that would be in the public comment portion at the end. I'll defer to Hillary if you object to the introduction of those as part of the questioning
I
at
can-
this stage.
So the architect is going to talk about both of those properties in his testimony, so maybe your question might get answered,
Answered.
or it might be better addressed to him.
Okay, that's fair. His name is
Yeah.
on the firm.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought this was the appropriate time. But I think the question would be, again, if is there a difference, in your opinion, professionally, when you say the words, you're working with the existing building and working with it would not be impossible, but then you're saying, however, it does not meet the requirements or the goals of your client. So I think it's a question between the use of the building versus the ability to rehabilitate the building, right? And so I think the question is structurally and from an engineering standpoint, is it actually feasible? And this is not the economic question, or that would be what was raised earlier by another board member. And so if you looked at those 2 points independently, the building itself, could it be preserved? And so if you change the use or this concept of adaptive reuse, right? It's how you're adapting or what the use is. So if those are two independent questions, you could preserve the building, and that's the question, could you, in your professional opinion? And, you know, we're talking about whether you have a completely open modern floor plan, right? So I think that's the question first, and then I could follow up.
So to be clear on the question, whether or not use can be separated from structure. But that's not the application here. The application is for a modern office building. I am going to answer a theoretical question. If one had nothing to do with the other, which is not what we were hired to do, your question then would be on the first part, can this building be, what is the exact question, salvaged or made
Or
structurally?
rehabilitated or adaptively reused, right? Preserved.
Again, then we're blending the question, but if I can draw a line, you're asking whether or not this structure can be structurally made safe and rehabilitated. I previously testified to that it could. I said that in the front page of my report, that parts of the foundation would require helical piles to stabilize them. That's my professional opinion. I think that the cracks can be repaired. You would have to do further invasive testing. But based on my experience, the solution would not be attractive. There is no way that that step cracking will ever disappear. You will always see it, even if you tried to fill it in, and even if there's no way you could jack it up. That's my opinion.
Could it ever be code compliant?
Yes,
And
structurally.
handicapped, accessible?
Oh, no,
And all of the
oh.
other things?
That goes beyond into the architect's testimony, but from a purely structural engineering perspective, I think I've answered that. But if you get into the other questions that council raised, the answer is no. You'd have to remove a structural part of the floor to create a handicap accessible ramp.
So then, I think the other question is, and I'm not sure who to address this to because it's been said multiple times, but in terms of talking about, have you, as a firm, worked with historic properties, and you certainly, in your website have a few photos. I think the question is, in terms of, have you worked with historic properties that are on the National Register of Historic Places?
We have in our portfolio worked on Gunther Mill. We have worked and restored the Playhouse in the village of Ridgewood. But in none of those examples has the structure been in the condition that this particular building is in, especially when it comes to answering the question of function on the inside. So our buildings have won some awards, but they've won awards because they're functional. And history has gone, with my expectation, hopefully another 200 years into the future. But in all of the buildings that we've restored that are on our website, the insides had a very different scenario than what is presented here, and the facades were very different. It is not the same, not the same.
Okay.
This is unique.
And I would say, of all those different structures, if they were all historic, were they each unique? In other words, you're saying this one is unique, and I think it is, but were the others that you restored unique to each other? So when you're saying this one's unique, I would ask you in your professional opinion of the other ones, were they also unique?
Unique, my definition of unique here was that there are step cracks on the top right, middle of the building. We don't know how it's connected, and the foundation has signs of differential settlement. In the other ones that I have restored, we did not have to contend with that level of repair because, again, it is my professional opinion as a structural engineer that you can never mask those scars of settlement, no matter what you do, unless you stucco it, which is not, in my opinion, a good answer here. A solution is strapping it, which we've done in other places, which would mean put steel straps on the inside and outside of the corner to stabilize it and through bolt it. That is not going to be attractive. So uniqueness is because of the set of circumstances that this property faces in connection with the proposed use of the inside. That's what makes this more complicated than others and unique in its own way.
And you mentioned that, I think you mentioned earlier in your speaking that you knew of buildings in New York City that were potentially similar in terms of level of challenge or difficulty, and that your firm wasn't necessarily prepared. I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth, but to address those. And is it the case that there could be a firm that could address that for the city of Summit?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Well, I think if there's a recording on this, but the fact that you said that you had seen buildings in the city and that they've been able to hold up the facade, essentially, and preserve it. And then I think, if I heard you correctly, but there are a lot of people in this room, that perhaps your firm wasn't equipped to do that, but could the city, for example, or are there other architects that you think could provide that service?
I don't think so, but again, I don't know if I can answer that question to your satisfaction. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then I think in terms of definition of historic as it relates to Summit's ordinances, our DRO, and the master plan, the question is this building historic based on the definitions in the city's documents?
I'll have to defer to the architect.
Okay. Because there's been multiple conversations here about whether this building is historic and whether it's just in the district. And I'd like to confirm that. So if that's not your question, we can defer. The architect can answer that. But I'd just like to correct for the record, because on the HPC website, we do have the actual application of the historic Summit Downtown District, and I'd just like to correct it for the record. And
Ms. King, I think that's going to go towards public comment,
Okay.
which we definitely want to hear it, but
Okay.
just do it in the
But
other part.
it's been discussed so many times
Yes.
that it turns, something that's potentially not correct. So I'd just like to correct that for the record. It's listed on the National Register.
That's, yeah,
Thank you.
if you could bring that up during public comment, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Jim Bergmeyer. I live at 167 Kent Place Boulevard, and I'm also on the Historic Preservation Committee. I do have a question. You did address a question regarding the underpinning of the existing footings, but I'm also concerned about just basically the safety procedures you have on the adjacent buildings to protect them during the demolition. What procedures do you have in place?
So the means and methods of that will be something that the general contractor will work on. It's, we have on our drawings our design, which contemplates not, as I said before, going under the bottom of footing of the adjacent buildings. Although our client, in this case, decided not to put the elevator to the basement, in which case we would have had to have underpinned it. He made a decision to keep things simple. He made a decision to move 3 feet away from both the buildings in the back, which I think complicate my design for me, but it makes the life of the adjacent property owners a lot easier. So that 3 feet is the first response that I have around the back, away. And the second thing that I want to reiterate is that The existing conditions will not change inside. We're not making the basement deeper. We're just going to put a new reinforced concrete wall on the inside, and that will extend to the bottom of the existing footings of the adjacent building. Fairly simple, not too complicated.
Okay. The buildings, your building and the adjacent building, there is no connection between the two, as far as structurally.
Which buildings?
The adjacent building to your building, one to the, yeah, one
the
to the
Boxwoods
left.
building?
Yes, that one,
None whatsoever.
okay.
Yeah.
And also, aren't most settlement cracks happen shortly after the construction of the building?
Not these.
No?
If somebody had left those cracks for 100 years, doesn't make sense. Those cracks, in my opinion, are perhaps in the last 20 years. They're not original.
Okay,
Yeah, in my opinion. They look pretty new.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the public? I just have one question and follow-up to that. How can you tell that the settlement cracks are pretty new, as you said?
So, usually what people try and do is mask them, and you'll see in a painted building, if you look at the pattern, you'll be able to see that they've been covered. This building must have been painted 20 years ago. It doesn't look like maybe 30, 40 years ago, whenever it was painted. Those cracks are, I can see they're fresher. They would not have existed for so many years, and especially the one in the back right. And they usually happen because of drainage issues, in my opinion. So sometimes if a leader leaks and it doesn't get repaired, the water is the biggest enemy. It reduces the soil bearing capacity from leaks, and that's what causes these step cracks and settlement cracks. In my opinion, it wasn't from the beginning. I don't know when it was, but if I had to get it closer, 20 years, 30 years these cracks formed, it's in the later part of its life. It's not in the beginning of its life.
You also haven't done a test to see if those cracks are stable, right?
I can tell you they're anything more than a 1/16 of an inch for
Yeah,
us.
I know, but
Yeah.
I mean, there's straps you can put on there with a gauge that measures,
An inclinometer,
To see-
correct. Yeah, you could put an inclinometer on it.
but you haven't done that.
No.
So they may be stable.
We'd have to
So you
put an
don't know.
inclinometer on.
If you don't do
and-
the test, you don't know.
Right. But anything that large moved.
Well, I was there today and they didn't look that large.
Okay, I have one question. How do you know, regarding Mrs. Zahn's question, that there's no, I know there was a building on Maple, when they did construction, they realized it was like, they shared the adjoining wall. How do you know, do you know for a fact that these walls are, these two buildings are separate? I don't know what happened, I mean, somebody that must
Or
know,
that
like the
Boxwoods
Elks.
is not leaning on this
Well, no, yeah,
building?
like the Elks building, they had, wasn't it, the problem was that they had one, they were sharing the wall. The exterior wall was the shared wall. Do you know?
I don't know, but I don't think so, because again, I look at the basement and I see the same interior foundation wall that looks like it's beneath the building. So, and we did measure the thickness around the perimeter. I'm fairly certain that the adjoining wall is independent. Because again, when you look at the basement, it's the same stone around it, and the brick goes above it.
So I'd also like to address that. There's a joint. If you look at the building, there are different bricks, different brick patterns, and you can see a joint that separates the two buildings, which I think is a pretty clear indicator they're two separate independent buildings.
Do we know when this building was constructed? The-
1897.
Okay, so, yeah, because well, there's a joint there, so there's a seam, but sometimes the party wall, the joists from both buildings sit into that with the fire cut and all that kind of stuff. So you're pretty confident that doesn't exist?
Again, I'm saying that because if you go to the basement, it's the same wall around, and you look up, and that's where the structure goes up. And based on what my client said, chances are.
Is the general contractor that you're using to carry liability insurance sufficient to address any potential damage to surrounding buildings?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's on the drawings. It's a good question. We list not only what the general contractor has, but the architects. The top left of our construction drawing sheet says all the insurance requirements.
What's the face amount?
Sorry?
What's the face amount of the insurance?
Oh, it is 1, 2, and then 5, I think we have on the... Again, we haven't done the construction drawings yet, so we'd be... It could be 5 for sure on a project like this. But again, we haven't finished the construction drawings. Usually we have 1 to 2, 2 aggregate, and 5.
Do you know if there's a minimum that they need to carry for that?
The state requires, I think, $500,000 for a contractor, but we have at least $1 million, 2 aggregate on our drawings.
Perhaps we could craft some condition around that, and arrive at some sufficient figure
Because
to cover it.
most of them are 500 million minimum, and if they only have the minimum, they make a mistake, they're out of business, and somebody gets hurt.
Good question.
Okay, any other questions from the public? All right, seeing none, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break here before we hear from the architect.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to resume the meeting, the hearing here, and we're going to hear from the architect. Just for the public's benefit, we wanted to let you know that we don't think we're going to get through the full testimony today. There's still a planner after the architect, and for tonight, our goal is to wrap things up probably around 11 or whenever the architect's testimony ends. And we'll see whether we get to questions for the architect tonight or the next time, and we would be looking at carrying to June 1st. Is that correct? Okay. Let's
just
make
have
sure
to
it works
double check,
before we,
right,
yeah.
Yeah. Any meeting after June 1st is also open. June 1st, June 15th, July 6th, July 20th. We don't need to decide right now either.
Okay, so we'll say June 1st for right now. If there's an issue, then we can.
Okay. I guess we're ready to hear from the architect.
Sure. Michael Sass.
All right, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And please state your name, spell your last name.
My name is Michael, last name is Sass, S as in Sam, A, S as in Sam.
Thank you, and can you briefly describe your background and experience for the board?
I'm an architect, graduated from Pratt with a bachelor's degree in architecture. I've been with Nick Sapitzeris Associates for over 20 years. Been a licensed architect since 2010, state of New Jersey, state of Washington, state of Maryland, Pennsylvania, and nationally accredited.
Any questions from the board? Would you like to accept his credentials?
I think we'll accept.
Okay, and just tell the board the steps that you've taken to prepare for your testimony.
Reviewed the property. We did a walkthrough, a visual inspection. We have looked over the application, as-built drawings, development regulations, development guidelines, and preservation guidelines, as well as reviewed and prepared the plans, conferred with the Historic Preservation Commission, and reviewed all the staff and review letters.
And I know that the engineer went through it, but as an architect, can you describe for the board the existing building and go through the building condition and assessment analysis prepared and filed as part of the application?
Yep. The building was constructed in 1897 of a Federalist and Colonial Revival style. The Colonial Revival is mimicked in the arch-top windows of the existing building. The Federalist element is more of the plain facade that you see on that second floor. The building is exterior masonry structural facade. It's integrated with the wood floor framing. The entrances include two retail, left and right, flanking the front entrance with the centered for the office and residential on the second and third floors. There's decorative moldings on the existing building, which you would see in our report that is dated December 29, 2005, on that front facade picture, photo number 1, Beechwood facade. That shows the cornice, a wood cornice element that kind of anchors that first floor and then sets the base work for the second and third floor. As mentioned, the second floor is kind of a plain running brick facade. There's not really any detail or decoration to it. It's a painted white brick. Between the second and third floor, you have a corbelled brick cornice that kind of sets a foundation to the Doric pilasters, and then that sets an entablature of another corbelled brick and then cornice on the frieze there. The archtop windows are then anchored and detailed with a stone and brick mimicked, or stone and brick archway. So that existing facade is, I would say, historical in nature, but it's a question of whether or not the building is historical. It is listed on the HPC's website, but with a subset note that is questioning whether or not it is applicable to the Boxwood building, which is not listed on their website that I could see. So it's whether or not the information sought is applicable to the other building. We would, like to determine that information.
So I think they're confused if we just
yeah,
explain.
very, very
I
confused.
see a lot of confused
I'm sorry,
looks.
yes.
Also, because there was something on the National Historic Registry that was listed in one of these
So,
reports.
yep, so part of our submission included the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for the building. In this report, it talks about 5-bay facade, the stone face. It actually describes the building fairly well. But then on the second page of it describes the location and significance and states should this be information for the building next door. And when we looked at the HPC's website, we did not find the Boxwood building listed, and we are questioning whether or not this information is actually applicable to that building next door with the historic significance of the property.
And that same report you just referred to, that is in, the historic preservation is on their website. It's part of like the list of all the properties in Summit, and they go through the historic designations for each
The
property.
NJDEP report is on the Historic Preservation
So
Committee's website?
this, do you have?
If you don't mind, I can.
Sorry, just,
Do you mind
I'm,
if I-
yeah, I'm confused.
Part of our visual inspection report.
Okay, we have that here, yeah.
It's
I
in the
just,
back page.
And
but I think.
I believe that's also part of the,
Oh, and the comment letter as well.
it's in the comment letter also.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that's on the HPC's website.
Okay.
So what you're saying is we don't know.
Right.
Even though it clearly describes this building with the description, the significance of this building is in question based on this information. And whether or not, yes, it has historical nature, it's been built in 1897, it's over 100 years old, it is described as a historical site per the definition of the development regulations. However, the information and kind of the anchoring purpose of this building is, we're trying to navigate that element. And because of that question, and we didn't write that report, we think it is applicable to the Boxwood building, which is not listed in their property.
Just, like, can I ask a question? So just in terms of what was the original occupant of the building is
Yes.
unknown?
Unknown.
Is the part that you're saying that in terms of there's no historical reference to what the building was built for, or who was the first occupant?
Who were the
correct?
first occupants and who was built for and founded by, and kind of giving it some presence of the historic nature of the property.
But it was all around the same time as the other buildings?
Correct.
So.
I can keep moving if you want me to.
Yeah,
I'm just
I think
wondering,
that's-
so then, this report, all this paperwork, we don't really know what it's for.
We have reviewed it, and again, it is described, it describes the 5-bay building, it describes the property in question,
Right, right, right.
13
But then you go
Beechwood.
back to the pictures, and it shows like a
References
U-shaped
the-
building, and,
Yep,
I mean, excuse me, L-shaped building, and, okay, thanks.
so, again, we didn't find that this property was in the national registration, we didn't find that this property had any history in the library or the historic research that we had done from our office. So, the exterior inspection, as has been stated by the applicant and the engineers, not accessible. The two or the three entrances to the building require steps. There's a variation of between 7 and 12 inches, depending on what side you're on the building. So accessibility to the building without encroaching into the right-of-way would be rather difficult without truly disassembling the building itself. The step cracks were quite detailed in the engineering testimony, and the office entrance has a crack in the cornice, which it's wood, it could be repaired and reset, but is unsightly in nature. On the interior, we saw some visible cracks when we were able to pop some tiles, and there was some rot and deterioration of the wood that we could see from water damage at some time and staining of the wood. The windows have been replaced with a vinyl-clad window. The arch-top windows are not original anymore. They've been filled with the plywood, and we use window AC units. And then, as described in our report, you can see in picture number 5, there's a fire escape which utilizes the means of egress for the back of the building on the 2nd and 3rd floor that is in disrepair and needs significant repair to bring it up to code. During our interior inspection, We saw that there's no accessible entrance, as previously stated. The second floor offices and third floor, or the second floor offices are more in a kind of a residential arrangement. It was clear that this was a residential building at a time, and then somebody has occupied it as their office in a broken up nature. The third floor consists of both office and residential spaces. The third floor offices do not have a second means of egress because they are blocked off by the residential units on the backside of the building. So those third floor offices should have a second means of egress for safe compliance with fire code. The building is designed in a quadrant layout with a number of framing directions, primarily in the north-south and east-west direction, and then the joists were bearing on the masonry wall on the exterior. The existing stairs go up the center of the building and then turn right and kind of snake up through the building. And so that arrangement of egress and current stair arrangement would not allow for a second means of egress within the current footprint of the building. Visual inspection kind of uncovered floor deflection, sagging. I believe Nick had testified to about 2 to 3 inches, which is almost, we're incapable of rectifying. So even if it were occupied as a residential unit, that sagging of the floor would still be maintained, and that use would still be not sufficient for any kind of use of a residence. If they saw 2 inches of sagging floor, they would think it's structurally unsound and would not want to live in that unit. Again, speaking about the water damage, there was sagging in those joists and apparent staining in the wood, which shows that there was water damage at some time and could continue to happen over time. The small punched windows don't allow much natural light into the building, and the low ceiling heights in the upper floors don't allow for much HVAC sprinkler distribution to even adaptively reuse it into an office space as it currently stands. There's no entrance lobby, there's no space for an elevator, there's no arrangement or possibility for interior ramps to maintain those existing stairs. So if we were to make the building accessible, the whole building would have to be gut rehabbed down to basically the bones of the building, and still would have difficulty making accessibility happen. So the rear shed is deteriorating. There is a discharge of stormwater onto the grade. Most of it goes underground, but there are points in the corner where it does discharge to grade. In any adaptive reuse, we'd want to, I don't want to use the term modernize, but we want to make it a comfortable indoor environment, which you can have climate control, you have daylighting, you have nice power, you have level floors, you have a space that you feel comfortable in and want to live in. And unfortunately, the building as it currently stands makes that very difficult.
And can you explain to the board why redevelopment for this site was more appropriate in this case than rehabilitation?
After we were initially hired to actually try and maintain the building as it was, making an addition off the back of the building. That was when we asked to go inside and complete our visual inspection, see what the floors are like. There's a broken up floor plate. Opening it up to an office or even making it a suitable residential space was very difficult to do with the floor plate and the existing structural walls that we maintain in the building. We have designed and built and adaptively reused a number of historic buildings. I believe Caroline had brought 2 to the bench. One was Gunther Mill. It's a 200,000 square foot silk mill that we had adaptively reused into residential units and industrial arts. And the other one is our office, the Playhouse, which is where we maintain our office. That was formerly the Playhouse in the Village of Ridgewood. Again, those 2 buildings were not in the condition of this one, where we had nice level floors. The building was not showing signs of crack or deterioration to this extent. So once we all looked at these elements of deterioration, we went to Mark, our applicant and client, and described the conditions we found, and he asked if we could salvage it, and we were unable to come up with the game plan that was suitable to maintain this building in this place. So even though demolition is not the direction we wanted to go initially, it seemed like it was our only solution. And part of that is, again, the concern of impacting neighbors. When you demolish a building, there could be impact to the neighbors, so it will have to be done safely and, as you have described, coverage in some manner for insurance protection and to take care of the adjacent properties during construction. So we would work with the contractor for means and methods to write and describe how to do that. So demolition of this building would have an effect on the neighborhood, but we feel that the new design will bring back the same character that the existing building had on that structure. It has the same character elements with the corbel design, the vertical articulation and the horizontal articulation with the bands. We tried to mimic some of the features with the Doric columns. We wanted to have a nice cap on the building with the decorative cornice, and then maintain that retail frontage and kind of that human scale to the building. So that the existing building has that nature with the broken up facade. So we have a nice, comfortable lobby. It's not grand. It suits the scale of the building. And then we extended the retail facade and broke up the facade in a nature that you have divided mullions and more of a picture window as you would see historically in a building of this time period. I believe there is a question about the whether or not the construction would impact neighboring merchants. Of course, any construction will shut down sidewalks, but there will be temporary protection and measures. Our site plan describes a tunnel to allow for pedestrian access through during construction. There will be points of closure, but we feel that the retail presence and the type of tenant that could occupy this building would actually bring a better character and better environment to the merchants and more foot traffic along this area as well. And we also agree demolition is not a free option. If cost was an option or really the driving factor, the answer would be to repaint the interior, keep the lead paint in place, keep the asbestos in place, keep the sagging floor. If really cost is this issue, then we would be just giving this thing a facelift and hoping to get a tenant into the building. It's not free, but we feel that this is the best solution, unfortunately, for this building at this time.
And can you go through the plans and highlight that it was important to retain the parking in the rear? So, I'm sorry, can you describe what is proposed? It's late.
It's good. So, we were tasked with having a retail element, as always, with being in the CRBD. So the front retail facing is a 1,500 square foot retail space on the right-hand side or the south side of the property. On the north side, we have the lobby entrance. If you don't mind, I'm going to walk over here and I can kind of point a little bit better.
And you're referring to A1?
Yes, okay. Referring to Exhibit A1. We have the front entrance to the lobby, which is more to a scale. It will be an accessible entrance. You have a decorative wood retail frontage with broken facade. And then we have an anchoring element here, a horizontal break between the first and second floor. This sets the foundation for our building. Then the office could be constructed upon it. The core elements of the lobby is vertical transportation, 2 fire stairs so that we can meet egress and fire code, and then also utilizing that 1,500 square foot retail space. The proposed rear parking is designed in the tandem arrangement as it currently stands. But the parking area is primarily covered in permeable pavement. So we would also have accessible entrance from that back entrance. So all points of entry now in this building are accessible. So the building design, we followed the development regulations, the guidelines. We wanted something that had nice scale and balance, fenestration between the solids and the voids. We wanted to maintain the similar decorations and features of that existing building. We capped our windows with a limestone key, and then the fallen brick lintel, and then also the limestone keyed lintel on the top with a Doric cap. We accented the second and third floor with a corbelled brick to kind of mimic that existing style that remains today. And then we capped it with a nice decorative cornice as currently exists, but with a different element to accent the architectural element here. The design is kind of, we wanted to maintain that Federalist style, and we also divided the windows to create a little bit better balance instead of having the previous picture window. So I'm going to actually refer back to our original design that was submitted, and then some of the improvements that we made to make this building, I think, better to scale in the neighborhood based on our conversations with HBC. So the original facade had larger picture windows, and to do that, we narrowed the window a little bit and then broke it with a mullion to make a more mold window and bring the scale to that entrance and smaller panes of glass.
Sorry to interrupt. Is this from your plans, or is this a separate
I'm
document?
Sorry, this was in our
That was in the
summary
original
report.
But the side-by-side comparison is?
Yes, it was in our March 25th summary report
Okay.
as Exhibit A.
Thank you.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to be sure.
Yes. So we, as I was saying, we were divided up the windows, we molded them together to create better balance. We narrowed those windows a little bit to create better scale between the solids and the voids. We created a horizontal corbelled break in the second and third floor, as well as another corbelled brick at the cap here as it's represented in the existing building. The top penthouse stays set back 12 feet from the building. It gives you 11 feet clear on that patio. So you do have a little bit of a line of sight, but we wanted to set that back to try and bury that fourth floor into the skyline a little bit more. We also turned that scale of the window down the side alley facade so that we have less, a little bit better proportions in our glazing system. So a few things that we want to just point out is just the more decorative elements in the vertical articulation, the horizontal articulation. We felt that after our conversation with HPC, those were important elements in scale to bring back to the building. So I've jumped around.
Yes, it jumps around a little bit. Maybe if you could talk about the height of the fourth floor and the appurtenance and the
Yep.
roof-mounted.
So the height of the fourth floor is, we go to 58 feet, I'm sorry.
5.67.
My elevation, refer to. Refer to drawing A201, detail number 1. We have a building height of 58 feet. That includes the two top appurtenance, where the building height itself is 56 feet. The appurtenance is for the elevator bulkhead to maintain accessibility to that fourth floor. In order to get that clear height and accessibility, we go above that fourth floor by 2 feet.
And how much square footage is that?
It's
I believe it's
It's
111.
about 111 square feet of an area, yes. And so that's even further set back from the facade. As you can see, it's not visible from the street at this point. So that would exist beyond this front facade here. So the building height is 56 feet. We're proposing
55.67 to be exact. Is that right?
55.67 feet, correct, proposed building height. And we're asking for that fourth floor so that we can maintain those 4 parking spaces in the rear. That way, we have a place for the merchants to park, also a place for a scale of a merchant of this scale. Usually loads from a van or their own personal vehicle, So this allows them to utilize that back parking space for that type of use.
And then can you just talk about the roof-mounted mechanical equipment?
Yep, I will turn back a page to drawing A106. We have a mechanical rooftop area which will be screened. This will capture...
Mr. Sass, could you speak into the microphone, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes. So we have a mechanical rooftop unit area which will be screened in compliance with the applicable ordinance. And again, this is set back far enough that it won't be visible from the line of sight in the street.
Okay. And then, can you just touch upon the engineer's report, item number 13? It has to do with the bollards.
Yes. So, I'm going to go to drawing A102. It's our first floor plan. I believe the engineer was referring to the columns at the back parking area in that comment. We are going to encase those two columns in concrete. We found that the bollards would actually encroach into the parking space a little bit further, and that encasing that in concrete and reinforcing it in concrete was a better solution to protect the building and the structure.
And then is there a reason there's no ADA parking proposed in the rear?
ADA parking is, the primary entrance to the building would be from the front for the retail and the lobby. They would utilize the street parking as is typical in an urban setting. There's not adequate space in the back for ADA spaces or ability to provide the clear, unobstructed clearances for that space. So in a tandem arrangement, you wouldn't be able to provide that barrier-free pathway. The other element is that your entranceway is from the front, retail is from the front. So our primary entrance for accessibility, which is the requirement of the accessible parking spaces, would be from the front of the building.
And then I believe you already described the architecture of the proposed building.
Yep, I can elaborate a little bit further on that.
Sure.
So as I had mentioned, we, as part of our collaboration with HPC in this design, we found that the scale of the facade as it was originally designed was just not adequate for the neighborhood. And as we present this new building with the space and the void, solid void ratio, more brick, more decoration, more horizontal and vertical articulation, we feel that this brings ourselves more into guidelines, the design guidelines and the development regulations.
And then can you describe the lighting that's proposed for the building?
Yes, I'm going to roll back to SP or something. On drawing SP 401 is our site lighting plan. In our back parking area, we're going to do lay-in ceiling tiles with a lay-in light fixtures. This is similar to what we did at 475 Springfield. This allows for the most reduced illumination that we could find for provide safe egress and pathway. It does create a slight variance on the property line of 0.4, where it should be 0.1, but to provide the illumination for accessibility and safety in that parking area, we felt that variance was a suitable request.
And where is it spilling off onto?
It's spilling off onto the face of the building, and it's a brick facade there. On the front, we have 2 can lights on the canopy and then one in the recessed retail entrance, and that's then shedding light greater than 0.1 onto the sidewalk. But again, that's wayfinding and provide proper safe entrance to the building. The other variance that we're seeking for...
And so the spillage is just onto the sidewalk, right?
It's onto the sidewalk.
It's not going to affect any vehicular traffic?
No, it's strictly down lighting onto the sidewalk. The other variance we're seeking for site lighting is a mounting height for the terrace lighting. These are building mounted lights. They are less than 15 feet above the third floor. Above the 4th floor. But because of the fact that they're building mounted, they're mounted on the 4th floor. They are actually mounted at 49 feet, 8 inches. And so therefore, it is a variance for the height of site lighting. But that light does not spill off the property for more than 0.1, and there will also be a downlight to be a little bit more environmentally conscious of no uplighting or illumination,
So it complies with the ordinance, but for the height.
except for the height.
But it's not on a post that's higher than 15 feet, it's just on the building and.
That's correct, on the building,
Because-
just mounted high because of the terrace.
Perfect. And is there any signage proposed?
Yes, I will point you to drawing A201, detail number 1, we have a building signage and retail signage. Both of those are compliant signs. They will be channel letter. The retail signage is proposed to be lit with gooseneck lighting from the front to comply with the ordinance and requirements. If a potential retail tenant were to seek a different design, then they would have to be in front of the board for compliance with their design.
But the proposed signage all.
But the
complies.
proposed sign all comply.
And then with regard to the administrative comments, I think that the engineer touched upon it, but can you respond to the city forester's comments?
Yes, there are, I'm going to flip back to drawing A401. There are existing 2 trees, and in our conversation during the TRC, John Linson said that the 2 trees had overgrown and outlived their expectancy, and he would actually recommend to remove them and replace them. And so we will comply with that comment and take no exception to it.
And I think that there was a condition that there be a $3,000 escrow established for the replacement of those trees, and the applicant agrees to that condition. And are there any other comments from the administrative reviews that you can comment on?
Let's see here. Talked about the TRC.
I think the engineer might have talked about.
I
the
believe
silk
he talked
fence,
about all of them at this
right?
point.
And then the only other one was the sidewalk to be replaced. I think there's a
I-
note on the plan.
Yeah, I believe that Nick had testified to the sidewalk being replaced, and there is a note on drawing SP 101.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Do we have questions from our experts?
I don't think I have any additional questions.
I might have a few, bear with me. Let's sift through my paper. Okay, so I guess the first would be, well, regarding the extent to which this is a historically significant building. It was built in 1897, which is within the historic district's period of significance. You've raised one question about whether or not it's actually historically designated. There's lots of paperwork that indicates it's at least within the historic district, built within that period. I'll let the HPC maybe opine as to its significance. But how do you, as an architect, determine in such a district what buildings are architecturally interesting, worth preserving, as compared to others that are built within maybe a similar period?
I would say
That's a
the
fair
Boxwood building would be a prime example of it. It has defined architectural features that make it characteristically kind of unique in the streetscape. So I would say that a building like that would define the characteristics of a historic building. Though the time period, yes, I agree with that it is built in the time period and within the designated area. It just the historical significance of the building. It's a Federalist colonial revival style that you can find typical in that time period.
All right, and you touched on some of the features that would reflect, I guess, that Federalist style
Yes.
from that period that you're looking to carry forward,
Mhm.
my understanding.
Correct.
Looking at that rendering that you prepared, one of our design requirements is that building facades facing a public alley reflect essentially the front building facade. Do you believe that that's been captured here, or could the alley be, facade be embellished a bit further? Do you think that's sufficient?
We turned the corner on some of the architectural elements. We carried the horizontal band in some of the architectural featuring of the windows and the divided panes. It could be more decorative, but we're also trying to mimic what was existing there as it stands, which was a very plain facade going down the alleyway.
Okay. Recognizing that you're requesting relief for the fourth floor part of the building, how would you contrast the design of that part of the building, or how does it relate to the rest of the building from a, I guess, a material and color standpoint?
Yep. So I can actually grab some materials really fast. So the existing, or the proposed brick would be kind of a textured
This would be A2.
red-brown brick, Exhibit A2.
That would be the first 3 floors?
That would be the first 3 floors, yeah, 1 through 3. The limestone and the cornice and the stucco in the rear would be more of a neutral tone in the sand tones, which would have a matching grout tone as well in there. And you're correct, we would have a more modern element on the top as a penthouse. So we would have a paneled system with black extrusion, and that black extrusion would match the window extrusion in the front facade. This color would then be carried into that retail color of the facade. So you have some connection between that top and bottom. So visually, it's a little bit more of a modern element up there, but we're bringing the characteristics and scale of the facade up onto that element, so it's just a matter of a material. Typically in a historical building, the penthouses were built after the fact and in a more modern design at the time it was built. So we wanted to replicate that kind of penthouse afterthought.
I'll leave it at that. In your review of surrounding buildings, I think there was some testimony that referenced buildings of a similar height, let's say. Could you maybe, again, remind us of what exists in the vicinity of this building that it would be consistent with from a height perspective?
So I believe Bob, our applicant, had testified to specific addresses, but on Springfield Avenue, we are located here on Beechwood. 1 block away, you have a 5-story multifamily residential. 466 Mark. Yeah, that's another 4-story building. Across the street at 475 is a 4-story building. And I mean, 1 to 4 is outside the CRBD, but that's a 4-story building as well. And there's another one, I think, within another 50 feet within that 4 and 5-story range.
All right, thank you.
The Bassett Building.
The Bassett Building, yes.
Thank you. I think I have, well, the issue of neighborhood consistency is interesting because on the one hand, you're trying to reflect the architectural features of a historic building. And so there's the question of, I mean, it seems like you've done that to some extent. I'm not an architect. But, and the question of how does that relate to the broader, historic district, I suppose. I think you addressed some of that. Just from a code compliant standpoint, the ordinance does require a cool roof treatment, I guess, on the uppermost roof of the building. Is that something you guys would consider?
I have no exception to that. I think there are a few GFA and, GAF and Certainty products that are cool roof required.
All right, and then finally,
certified.
It looks like above the office entrance, there's sort of a canopy feature. Would there be an awning or similar above the retail?
So I believe it was questioned by Ms. Chifo, what this projection was, and that is actually acting as a canopy for wind and rain protection for the entrance and exit onto that onto the balcony area, so that the doors don't open, you have a little bit of protection, and you don't get as much wind-driven rain into the building.
Okay, and finally, as far as the height, could you explain, I guess, the different floor heights, starting with the first floor?
Yep.
So the first floor is retail, and then you'd have 3 floors of
Yes.
office.
So what we found in the office building and retail mixed use is that 14 feet floor to floor is the ideal application. This allows you 18 to 24 inches of structure. It allows you the mechanical chase and the sprinkler, as well as lighting and illumination. So in order to get a 9.5-foot ceiling, you need between 13.5 and 14 feet of floor-to-floor height. So first floor of retail to, first floor to second floor is 14 feet, and 14 feet thereafter, because it's a modular that works for a modern office user or any office user these days.
But the interior is not 14 feet.
The interior is not, it's 14 feet floor to floor, which then provides for you between 9.5 and 10 feet of clear height.
So the ceiling height is
The ceiling
9.5.
height, yes.
Okay. All right, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Can I just ask you a quick question? I'm sorry. In your professional opinion, is there any portion of the existing facade that you would consider historic or worthy of preserving?
The third floor of the existing facade has architectural features that are, I would say, historically have representation of the time period. I would say that those features are the only elements in the building that are worth preserving. With the arch top, the stone accents, those elements. But in the case of this building, the arch top glass window has been removed and replaced with plywood and vinyl windows.
And it's been repainted?
It's been repainted a number of times over, and we don't know if there's patchwork of brick behind that either. So the brickwork and the detailing it's a feature that I would say could be restored, preserved, but it is a feature that is not really, the windows are not really original at this point anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm sure the board is burning to ask their questions. I know I am, but I fear that if we start that, we're going to be here for another hour just getting to the board's questions, and then, yeah. So we should probably stop here and carry till June 1st.
I'm willing to answer some questions.
Yeah. It's hard to start.
I know,
And
I know.
then decide who we're going to cut off. So I think it's probably better to just hold the question.
I can re-summarize at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So I'll ask, waiving the time frame to act?
Yes.
Thank you, and I imagine we are looking to carry it without further notice until June 1st.
Yes.
So we just need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Zahn,
Yes.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Chifo,
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli,
Yes.
Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Yeah, that, and that, yeah. I guess they'll bring in. Do we want to say something about it now? So before you leave, the one rendering, we don't have that. That's A1, and then the building materials are going to be A2. And do
So-
we need a copy of that to put on the public record, since we already heard that part of the testimony?
We'll need both exhibits, yes.
Before the, like,
So I can email you this one tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
And then we can leave the samples with you. I don't need to take a picture of them.
Is a picture sufficient, or do we want the actual?
We should hang on to the actual.
We'll need the actual samples.
No, yeah, no, I know, but
Okay.
I'm saying for the, if you want to put it on the website, you can just take a picture of it.
Okay,
Yeah,
does that work? Yep. Thank you.
that's the only way.
We have church building materials and everything.
Case file, which is just added to mine.
We have
Yeah, right?
We have two resolutions for memorialization. Up first is 55 Tulip Street, zoning board application number ZB-25-2320. The eligible voting members are Mr. Mullen, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Curran, Ms. Chifo, and Mr. Chanchuli. Could we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Mullen,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Chifo,
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli.
Yes.
Up next, we have the resolution for 46 Colt Road, zoning board application number ZB-25-2318. The eligible voting members are Mr. Mullen, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Curran, Ms. Chifo, and Mr. Chanchuli. Could we get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Mullen?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Curran?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Yes.
Thank you. And then there are no minutes for memorialization this week.
So a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you. We're done.